Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the CSL versus ECCA US versus Korea International Collegiate Hearthstone show match. That was quite a title. And I'm Kevin Aki, joined alongside by Kevin Dong, otherwise known as Liquid Monk. And how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. I'm very looking forward to casting with you. I've been a fan of you since your old StarCraft days, listening to all your casting, IPL, and it's going to be a great opportunity to cast this with you, this Hearthstone match. That'll feature some of Korea and America's best collegiate Hearthstone players.
Jeez, you're just going to make me blush, dude. That's what's going on here. But of course, we are live here at Twin Galaxies Live out in North Hollywood, and we're going to be bringing you guys six best of 3 matches between the best U.S. collegiate players and the best Korean collegiate players. Now, each of these players has been tasked with bringing 4 decks to the table. One of those decks is going to be banned out, and then we are going to play a best of 3 with the remaining decks, which means that there is still a little bit of play for each of our players here. But other than that, once we get through all 6 matches, we'll see who has taken most of those, and of course, they will be crowned the victor. So going into this, we do have a couple of known players that are here, some folks that are pretty high up on the rankings overall. Do you know a little bit about our competitors that are going head-to-head today?
Well, I think the main player that a lot of people know about is Dart. He's a somewhat popular American player. He goes to medical school right now, which is pretty difficult balancing Hearthstone, competitive Hearthstone, and medical school. And we've seen him cast a lot of tournaments as well. We've seen him play in, for example, the ESL Legendary Series. We've seen him cast even BlizzCon, the NA qualifiers for BlizzCon. We've seen him cast NESL. He's very active in the scene right now, and I've been talking to him a lot, and he wants to get even more into the scene, play more games, and this is, of course, one way to get into Hearthstone more, playing in the Collegiate Starleague.
Yeah, definitely. And I always liked this. I mean, even when I was involved in the StarCraft scene, CSL was putting on some great events and really just promoting esports throughout the collegiate scene. I think that's something that's becoming a lot more popular. And we're even seeing some pretty cool instances of schools that have started to recognize esports on the athletic level that many of their conventional sports are too. University of Illinois just took a big step in this direction by saying, yeah, we're going to start recruiting League of Legends and other sorts of players. So I love the fact that this game is continuing to be promoted at the college level, and I'm looking forward to what these players will bring out. As we mentioned before, they all got to design 4 decks, and we've already had pre-selected bans. The matchups have already gone through, and they've decided to ban those decks out ahead of time, so we should be able to flow through the matches pretty quick. We were taking a look at some of the decks beforehand, and there were a few things that jumped out at us. Namely, U.S. players are afraid of playing against Warrior and Handlock, or Warrior and Warlock, I should say. That is entirely what they have banned on the Korean side. Whereas the Koreans have banned out a lot larger variety of decks. We see them knocking out Paladin, Druid, Shaman all over the place. So, I mean, what does that tell you a little bit about the way maybe the teams are thinking about their bans?
Well, of course, on the North American servers and generally in the Western community, people are thinking Handlock, Zoo, Warrior, those are 3 of the best classes, the best decks in the Western scene right now. Whenever you see like a Reddit post basically saying, oh, I got #1 legend, it's usually either a Zoo, 6-0 of course, Handlock, or a Warrior player. And the Warrior is usually Show.
Right,
yeah,
definitely.
And whereas we see the Korean players, they've banned a lot of Shaman, and each of them have pretty much each brought a Shaman of their own. We're not really too familiar with the Korean metagame right now, but it seems like Shaman is really big over there.
I've noticed Shaman a little bit more on ladder out here as well. It's still a reasonable counter to some of the decks that were out there when Hunter was so prevalent at the end of last season, as everyone was rushing to get the Legendary with as many games in at the last second as they could. I saw a few more Shamans here and there, or I saw a few more Shamans that were there as well. But what I'm really excited about is the fact that we actually have a decent amount of Rogue and we have a decent amount of Mage in here, but a surprising lack of Paladin given how strong it has been lately.
Yeah, you see Paladin in a lot of lineups in tournaments in the Western scene, and it's kind of been replacing Shaman a bit as the mid-range deck of choice. Shaman has these small minions, they have the piloted shredders now, they have the shielded mini-bot, and they can buff up these minions quite easily. Of course, the Quartermaster combo is always a threat, and it's something you have to be wary of all the time. Similar to pretty much how Shaman plays, mid-range creatures go for just basically an all-round good game.
All right, so I think we're going to begin the games here actually very soon, and this is going to go pretty quick for us tonight, guys. There's not going to be a ton of downtime. As we mentioned before, there are going to be in total 6 best-of-3s, which means we do have a potential of 18 games of Hearthstone here over the course of the night, which means we could be in for a pretty long broadcast. Again, these folks are coming from many different universities from across the world as well. We have some of the most prestigious universities in Korea actually sending representatives into this show match, and a lot of people that have been involved in the esports scene for quite a while. So our first matchup is actually going to be Dart, as you mentioned before, who does attend USC. We do know that his decks he's bringing are a Druid, a Warlock, and a Warrior. He did have a Paladin that has been banned out. He's going up against his opponent, who unfortunately, I do not read Korean, so I do not know his name offhand, and I'm sure someone's going to yell at me, and I apologize. However, I can tell you that he attends the Korean Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, so likely down that engineering path. He is bringing a Druid, a Hunter, and a Shaman deck. He did have a Warlock that has been banned, so we have a possibility of Druid, Warlock, Warrior versus Druid, Hunter, Shaman.
I think probably the key deck that's going to be coming out for the Korean player will be the Shaman deck. We see Warrior, we see Warlock, which in my experience of Dart, it's probably going to be a handlock. Dart's one of those players that he kind of prefers control matchups. He kind of prefers the longer game. And I'm sure he's going to be thinking, I'm one of the best players in North America, whether at the collegiate level or not. And I'm going to be able to beat my Korean opponent in a longer game.
So do you think that means he's probably going to lead off with, say, the Warrior to give him a reasonable chance against maybe, I mean, he already knows that there's a Hunter and a Shaman there.
I think the Warrior is he's probably going to think that the Warrior is favored against Hunter, and it's probably out of his lineup the best deck, or maybe even the only deck that will be good against the Hunter.
Yeah.
The handlock is kind of iffy. It's kind of like it's not, I wouldn't say it's unfavored, but it's kind of a coin flip in that, do you draw your Ancient Watchers and your Iron Beak out early on? Do you get a Hellfire? Do you get your Molten Giants in order to be able to protect yourself when he's about to kill you? It's not that great, and the Druid, it just feels like it can get sniped easily with things such as freezing traps. Sometimes they just don't put out enough presence early on in the game. I don't know. But the Warrior, it has the Fire War Axes. It can stop the Hunter aggression early, and it's never afraid of going low in health because it can always come back with Alexstrasza, with Shield Blocks, with Shield Maiden.
Yeah, I mean, if I was playing Darts decks, I'd probably run with the Warrior here right now, just given what I know from my opponent. On the other side, though, for the Korean player, we have Druid, Hunter, and Shaman. You mentioned that Shaman's going to be important as a swing deck to see exactly what it is. Maybe it comes out as a direct counter to something that Dart has on the board. But what do you think he leads with there? You were talking a lot about the Warrior-Hunter matchup. Do you think that the Korean player is going to lead with the Hunter deck out of these three?
I think after talking to a lot of pro players, it feels like a lot of people, their strategy when picking lead decks is just to pick an aggressive deck that can just win against no matter what. You kind of get a little lucky. Even if you face a counter, you can win. For example, if you're going to play Freeze Mage, lead off with Freeze Mage first, you get a bit unlucky, you hit with a Warrior, you just lost that first match automatically. Whereas if you play Hunter, even if you hit a counter, the counters are going to be like 40% maybe in favor of, or 60-40 in favor of them. So it's still a possible win. It's not like you're throwing away a game or anything.
No, I agree with you. And Hunter has, like you said, a potential to win against anyone, because you can always just happen to go Undertaker and 6 Death Rattles in a row and you just win the game. It doesn't really matter exactly what you had there as your opponent. Like, the only times that is potentially counterable is when you, of course, luck into those awesome coin Fiery War Axe and things like that as a warrior. But like, Hunter always has a potential to win at any given point in time. They can just get the nuts and just win right off the bat in the first 3 turns.
Yeah, definitely. Hunter is a deck like that. Zoo is a deck like that. And we're seeing post-GVG, now Mech Mage has become a deck like that.
Yeah.
These are all 3 decks that have become aggressive decks that can win just no matter what. They can get a huge tempo lead, whether it be with Undertaker or it be with Mech Warper, as in the case with Mech decks. All very strong decks, and I'm very glad that GVG has introduced pretty much a 3rd aggro deck into the mix. Before it was all control decks, but now we get to see more of a variety.
We do definitely get to see more variety. I do admit, like, I'm at the stage right now with GVG where I like a lot of the changes, and I feel the game is actually in a pretty good spot, meaning that whenever I start watching a tournament match where I know I'm going to see multiple decks, I always feel there's reasonable counters. I don't ever feel like one player is incredibly favored for bringing one deck to the table or anything like that. But there is a part of me that kind of wishes we would start to see some really crazy decks coming out of GVG. I think that up until this point, and you and I were talking about Mill Druid a little bit before this, but even before that, that Mech Mage was kind of really the only example of a deck that was significantly different than what we had seen in the meta previous to that a couple of weeks ago. So I think I'm still just waiting for those first couple of decks that are truly just off the wall, a concept that we haven't really seen yet.
Yeah, the way I like to see it is that Nexramus was kind of the Curse of Nexramus expansion was kind of an expansion that kind of catered towards more to the higher level players.
Yeah.
They added really good cards, Undertaker, Sludge Belcher, Lotheb. That kind of fixed some problems. Lotheb kind of helped against Miracle, which was a big problem before Nexramus. Sludge Belcher helped a bit against aggro against Zoo. And then Undertaker kind of gave like a new meta deck. But GVG, it feels like it's been more catered towards the casual player base. It has a lot of fun cards, like the Piloted Shredder can get anything from that. You have the Recombobulator. You have Neptulon, which can just summon Warlocks out of anywhere. But before I go on, I think, is our first match is about to start?
Yeah, I think so. It looks like the game's actually going here. So we'll just go ahead and actually start talking about that. So again, folks, we do have Dart here against his Korean opponent, and Dart's actually going to start with his Warlock deck. We were correct, though, on the Korean side. It is a Hunter starting off, and of course, you wish there was an Undertaker there, but 2 Leopard Gnomes in an opening hand. That's tough to watch if you're a Warlock.
Yeah, with a double Leopard Gnome start and a Hunter Creeper, you can't be too sad. And it's interesting here. We see a tracking from the Hunter, which is a card you don't normally see. Hunter these days are less worried about finding the right card and more worried about finding a card that's just on curve and just playing everything on curve as quickly as possible. And wow, we see from Dart, it's going to be a Zoo deck and not a Handlock deck. And this start is going to be pretty awesome.
Oh,
Undertaker
God.
into Voidwalker. That's pretty much the perfect counter to the Leopard Gnome start.
Well, Voidwalker right now is just such a good card against Hunter in general. They're running so many, like you mentioned before, they're trying to go for curve. They don't run tracking anymore because you're not as dependent upon Unleash the Hounds or for anything really anymore. Most people just aren't even playing it. So he can attack him with the Leopard Gnome. His choice right now is Haunted Creeper or tracking. I don't think if he explosive traps, he's in a decent spot because he attacks in. He deals the 2 damage with the Leopard Gnome. There's always a potential to buff the Undertaker. But he doesn't really have any solid, really good plays here.
Yeah, even though he doesn't have any solid plays, the fact that he does run the explosive trap, it's kind of a good sign for him. It means that his deck is at least somewhat tailored towards facing against aggro matchups against this Zoo player. So we could be seeing, because we see this explosive trap, we could be seeing things such as Unleash the Hound, such as Knife Juggler, and those are some key cards that can help you come back from this board that you're pretty much doing pretty badly in.
Yeah, I'd like to know what the rest of his deck is, though, because, in taking tracking, you have less... I don't know, it's always good to dig for cards, but, like, you have a better potential of knocking out something that you would actually want to see, I think. So, okay, looks like Voidwalker is going to trade here with one of the 1/1s. Of course, clearing out the Haunted Creeper takes any beasts off the table as well. He draws into a Mad Scientist, and it looks like he's just going to instantly drop that and the Leopard Gnome, not even considering the tracking right now.
Yeah, tracking seems to be more of a card that you want to save towards when you don't have another option left.
Yeah.
When you're playing against Zoo, and as a Hunter player, you pretty much always want to be going for tempo, trying to get that board control, because whoever has the board control has a huge advantage going into the game. You know, it was Strifecrow who, Strifecrow obviously is one of the best players in Hearthstone right now. He once told me that he probably considers having a minion on the board more important than any other player. Because a minion on the board is essentially a spell that can attack every turn. That Undertaker on the board, for example, it does like 2-3 damage every turn. So it's like a spell that does 2 or 3 damage every turn. And that was a very unique way of thinking about it.
Whoa.
And it opened my mind at least. Whoa, this is going to be a very aggressive Hunter.
What? No, Arcane Golem and Abusive Sergeants, no chance. He's got a lot of damage he can throw at his opponent, and So far, Dart has been okay with trading away his Voidwalker, getting rid of taunts, but he's going to start seeing a ton of damage here in a second. Now, fortunately for our Hunter, Dart last turn didn't really have anything to play on curve and was forced to tap with 3 mana, and then didn't really play anything after that as well, so his board is not nearly as well developed as he'd like it to be. And there is a point with Zoo. I mean, it's not as bad as Handlock where you're worried about taking that 2 damage every turn because you're not intentionally getting yourself really low in life necessarily, but it does add up. And if he can't put a board together within the next couple of turns, just between Arcane Golem, you've got to assume there will be a beast in the next couple of turns. There's still a huge amount of damage that the Hunter can lay out very soon.
Yeah, definitely. We see the Korean player's deck has Explosive Trap and Arcane Golem, which means it's a very aggressive deck. Unfortunately, Dart, he doesn't have that board built up like you said, and he wishes that it were a lot better. But this Hunter deck, it seems to be a Phase Hunter deck, which is something we haven't seen in a very long time. Ever since pretty much the first Hunter deck was a Phase Hunter deck, and ever since then, other more mid-range control-y decks, control-y Hunter decks, have been more of kind of commonplace. We see Dart used double Arcane Golem. That's gotta hurt.
I would love to know that trap. I'm assuming it's Explosive Trap, given the fact that we've seen the Abusive Sergeants. Like, I don't think he's going to be running anything else other than that. Maybe a Misdirection, possibly. But, yeah, so next turn he's got, what, 4, 8, 10, he's got enough damage for lethal here, supposing that they just attack into that Explosive Trap, assuming that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. I believe it was an Explosive Trap because Explosive was not... the explosive in the Korean player's hand was not able to be played. Yeah, and indeed, it is an Explosive Trap. 2 more damage to the Warlock's face, and oh man, Dart needs a taunt ASAP, and there he gets it.
Yeah.
The Voidwalker, his second Voidwalker, one of the only other taunts in his deck. What a great pickup.
Yeah, that's actually really fortunate for him, because especially if he hits another Taunter right now, that Lotheb is going to turn into something that's very beefy soon. Oh, wow. Okay, so Kill Command pops out. He'll use this to clear up the 1/3. He'll do 2 damage to the face. But the Zoo, if he can put a decent Taunter in front of there and actually stop some of this minion damage, he might have a chance to stabilize. However, that hero power is going to kill him alone in 2 turns with a Kill Command, supposing he hits a beast.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of beasts in this Hunter's deck. Obviously, it's a Hunter deck, so
right.
You're going to be expecting a lot of beasts. Dart's going to have to be playing very defensive from here on out. He gets a Defender of Argus, another very good pickup. And I believe that might be the only other taunt in Dart's deck. These days, double Kill Command. Is that it?
No. Well, I mean, he didn't quite have enough mana to pull everything off this turn. He would only been able to do 8 damage to the face if he had 8 mana, because he doesn't have a beast. So he was just short, but honestly, at this stage, it doesn't matter. Next turn, he just Kill Commands and laughs.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough position for Dart right now. He got all the taunts in his deck because these days you pretty much only run one Defender of Argus. But the Hunter player pretty much got the nuts. He got every damage dealer that he could have. He curved out really well early game. He got both Kill Commands. And as you're finishing your opponent off, you really want those Kill Commands. 5 damage to the face. It's not something that the Warlock can stop. Yu doesn't run any heals typically, so unless we see an Earthen Ring Farseer out of nowhere, or a Galaxies maybe from Dart.
Yeah.
I think Dart's going to be losing game 1.
Yeah. I've always waited for that one random Zoo deck on ladder to run 1 copy of Galaxies, and at that moment when I think I finally got the board turned around, they just Galaxies, and I just shove my whole computer off of my desk and rage quit life. Fortunately, it hasn't happened yet.
But you know what, Kevin? You've probably prepared for this already, because you already run a sacrificial pack in anticipation for that one moment.
Oh, and even just the Doomguard just to say why not. Gets him down to 9, but that's going to be a game in the bag for our Korean team. They go up 1-0 over Dart.
1-0. It's going to be really good for the Korean team to be 1-0 against their North American counterparts. As you're from a StarCraft background, you know that Koreans have typically been fairly dominant in esports, typically as far as StarCraft is concerned. But in card games such as Hearthstone, maybe not so much.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I was going to say, typically Koreans, they don't do that well in card games. I think possibly because just Magic isn't as popular in Korea as it is in America, as it is in Europe, or even as it is in Japan. So it's just not like, I guess the Korean players over there don't have a card game background to go with, basically.
Yeah, and I think this could be a pretty good gateway drug there for most people into the collectible card scene, though. So I actually went the other way. So like, it's like I started playing Magic competitively for a couple of years in my adulthood, and then it just so happened that I went to work for Blizzard and got into the pre-alpha of Hearthstone at the exact same time, and then pretty much just only played Hearthstone from there on out. Now I'm addicted, but. Now I am wondering though if there is maybe a bit of. I don't know enough about the scene to determine whether this type of game, though, is just not a great fit for your typical Korean gaming scene as well. Like, if there's a different training regimen, you have to have a different way you approach the game and think about it, to be honest. But I have faith there. The Korean scene has obviously been dominant in basically every game that they have tried to play in the past, so I have no worries about the fact that they are going to be dominant within a year or two. So.
Oh, definitely. They're pretty much dominant right now in League, and then they're coming up in Dota, and Hearthstone is just very soon they'll be the dominant force in Hearthstone too. I feel, along with the Chinese players, of course.
Oh yeah, no kidding. I've been enjoying the China versus Korea Masters more than anything else lately. That's been a fun event. So, been looking at cards here. Not only do we have a Hunter's Mark, which isn't something that's 100% seen in all Hunter's decks nowadays, there's the Blood Mage Thalnos. And it looks like that's what he's going to coin out right now.
Not something you see every day. Coin Blood Mage Thalnos from a Hunter. That's got to be scratching his head right now. What's going on here?
Yeah.
Why is there a Blood Mage Thalnos?
And like, it would be awesome if suddenly he top decks some relevant spell because his opponent played Wild Growth. Because you have to, of course, as a Druid. You want to hit that turn 2 Wild Growth. You want to be able to maximize your mana advantage. And Blood Mage gets in for 3 damage, thanks to Abusive Sergeant.
I guess there's some use for Blood Mage after all. Now, after seeing Blood Mage on turn 2 from the Hunter, as a Druid player, if I hadn't faced this deck before, I'd be thinking, is this a Feigned Death deck? Like a very control-heavy Feigned Death deck? But of course, he's faced this deck before. He knows it's the complete opposite. It's just a face hunter, as much damage as possible to the face.
I mean, what can Blood Mage benefit in this deck? The only thing that we've seen is kill commands so far. Is there anything else that would have benefited greatly from Blood Mage being in there? Because I'm just trying to think, other than consistency, another 1/1 body that you can buff with Abusive Sergeant, and of course the card draw, which is always relevant. Why is Blood Mage here?
I mean, you could go for a stretch and say that it kind of buffs up Explosive Trap as well. But if you're facing, if you have an Explosive Trap up and a Blood Mage Thalnos up, you're probably going to be attacking the Blood Mage Thalnos and not the Explosive Trap. So that's just be a very rare occurrence.
Okay, so this is an interesting spot because on curve is Arcane Golem right now. And, well, I guess he has Arcane Shot as well, so there's another spell that Blood Mage Thalnos can actually benefit with its spell power. But now, you're going to have a Druid that's going to be sitting on 7 mana next turn. And this is the point where Druids start to get a little bit scary. Now, unfortunately, we can see the hand. We know there is no Ancient of Lore sitting around or an Ancient of War there. This is going to be a swipe to clear the board, and actually this is a really good turn because he'll innervate into a Sludge Belcher here.
Yeah, the Korean player essentially gave Dart another Wild Growth. So Dart is pretty much sitting on 2 Wild Growths right now, which is pretty insane. And not only that, he started as player 1, so he's essentially now 3 to 4 mana ahead the entire game.
And he still has removal available to him, although that Black Knight does not seem like it's going to be the best card in the world. Sunwalker is great because he can Sunwalker, Hero Power, clear the board, and he's down to 7, or I mean, he'd be down to 18, I apologize. So he will get that point of armor, but this is all of a sudden a much nicer place, or so you would think to be as a Druid. Of course, we know that Hunter's Mark and Ironbeak Gal is still sitting around there for the Hunter.
Yeah, when Dart first picked the Druid into the Hunter instead of the Warrior, I was a bit confused, but now I see how it all makes sense. He's playing a very heavy Ramp Druid, which does a lot better against Hunters than your typical double Savage Roar, double Force of Nature combo Druid. Just has a lot more taunts, and you can stem the damage that the Hunter deals against you very easily. Here's a Druid of the Claw. He played a Sunwalker. He played a Sludge Belcher. I mean, wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw an Ancient of War being drawn next turn, just to fill out the curve.
Of course, right? He's got to. So I maybe think he should shy away from swipe. I mean, swipe gets value. It clears the whole board. It means he doesn't have to risk his guys, and he sets up for lethal 1 turn earlier. I get that. It's still very high value. I guess a little part of me, though, is a bit surprised he didn't try and reserve that for even better value here in a bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like in this Hunter deck in particular, there's not many creatures that are above 1 or 2 health, except perhaps maybe Animal Companion. So that could be a reason just to swipe to face right now in this instance.
I guess
and
that's
he already
true.
has a really good build, really good board right now. So I guess any creature that would be vulnerable could just be taken out by the board. That's one argument at least.
And Dart, of course, knows that's an explosive trap, so he sends his 4/1 Druid of the Claw into the Haunted Creeper to clear it up so it won't proc the trap, and he can at least get a tiny bit of value from it. He's going to go to the face here, so he'll only be able to... No, I guess he'll be able to clear both of these. He has the Ancient of War, of course. Of course. So we'll set a 5/10 taunt in place.
Are you sure? Maybe it's a 10-5. No, it's a 5-10.
Against a Charge Hunter. Good. Yes. We're going with that.
One can hope. One can hope, right?
Fair point. All right.
He's already seeing that both Owls have been used and one Hunter's Mark has been used. So it's going to be really tough for this Hunter player to get past that Ancient of War. And as you can see, he can't do it this turn, which probably means he's dead. Yep, the Hunter player concedes, and it's on to Game 3, the deciding match of the series.
And we did have a proactive BM. Sorry about that. So thank you, Dart. We appreciate it. That's 5 out of 10 BM rating on that one. Good job. And as the chants of USA are happening here at our studio audience at Twin Galaxies Live, we have a tied series 1-1 going into the last set. The Hunter is down, which means that we could potentially have a Druid mirror match or a Druid versus Shaman.
Druid mirror or Druid versus Shaman. I would think that Shaman is going to be one of the best counters to Druid from the Korean perspective, just because they favor Shaman so much, they like Shaman so much, and even in the Western scenes, Shaman seems to be regarded as a counter to Druid. Shaman and Paladin, again, are the 2 mid-range decks that we see in Hearthstone right now that kind of fill up the board and then buff the creatures and then trade very well. But no, I was wrong. It's going to be a Druid mirror, and we're just going to see who draws Wild Growth first.
Well, it looks like it's going to be Dart, at least for now. So he has his Wild Growth in hand. Mind Control Tech, Keeper of the Grove, Ancient of Lore, so he's even set up against those. Hey, let's spam the board mid-range decks and buff them up, Paladin and Shaman, like you were talking about before.
Yeah, Mind Control Tech is a very good counter against those kind of decks. And it's becoming more popular lately after... a deck was posted on Reddit that included Mind Control Tech, and it got up to like very high legend. I've been seeing Mind Control Tech in a lot of Druid decks, and I hope it catches on. It introduces a lot of flavor into the deck, whereas before it was just like, play this one creature, see if your opponent can kill it. No, he did. Just play another creature. It just adds a different dynamic to the entire game. Of course, he throws it away because he has a Wild Growth, and the Mind Control Tech isn't that much value against Druid. Druid typically isn't going to see 4 or more creatures on the board.
So they both have hit Wild Growths now. Of course, we should be able to see a turn 1 coin Wild Growth to set him up for 3 mana and potentially a turn 2 Druid of the Claw. It looks like he's going to pass that, though, and decide to save that for a little bit later. I guess that would give him, let's see, that would give him 3, 4. That gives him a 7 mana card, though, on turn 4 if he reserves his coin. Oh my god, or he just draws his second Innervate and then he just plays whatever he wants. Sure, okay, you do that, Dart.
Yeah, turn 2 Ancient of Lore, not bad. Not bad at all. Or turn 2 Dr. Boom, even better.
Yeah, no kidding. What do you do against a Dr. Boom at this stage of the game? By the way, okay, quick, your thoughts. Dr. Boom, does it need a nerf? If so, how? Go, you're on the spot.
All right, Dr. Boom, very strong. It's in every deck right now, and it kind of has like the Sylvanas effect. It kind of has a Loatheb effect where you pretty much have to include it in every deck or almost every deck, and if you don't, you're kind of giving up on something. It's very good because the power is split up. It doesn't get countered by Hex, and it doesn't even really get countered by BGH, because if you BGH it, the Boombots can just trade in. I think it is a bit strong right now, and how I would nerf it is probably making the Boombots maybe do a little less damage, 1 to 3 instead of 1 to 4, or perhaps making it a 7/6 to make it more killable.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you because to me it represents so much value just because it is the most uncounterable card in the game right now. Are you playing Mirror Entity? You only get a 7/7. Are you playing any sort of a single target removal effect? There's still boom bots you have to deal with. AoE? You just hurt yourself. I love Dr. Boom. I really do, but I do agree his power just needs to be tweaked down just a bit. Getting back to the game, Dart decides to go through his Innervate and Coin, and he did do that play we were talking about before. Turn 2 Wild of Growth, turn 3 Ancient of Lore, draw 2 cards. Not bad.
Yeah, unfortunately for the Korean player, he got his Wild Growth early, but he didn't get any creatures to follow up into that. He has 2 Ancient of Lores, which are just sitting very awkwardly in his hand, and he has to expend a Swipe and a Hero Power eventually to be able to clear this Ancient of Lore. There's just no good plays for him right now.
No, there's really not. You're absolutely right. And you're also correct in that Swipe was the best available play to him. Otherwise, he's completely conceding the turn. And it's likely, given how good or how many cards are available to Dart at this stage and how well he's hit his mana ramp as well, that he's going to start throwing out taunt after taunt after taunt, which means that if you don't do damage to the Ancient of Lore now, then you're just not going to be able to get to it later. And case in point, there's a 4/6, and he can't do anything about it.
Yeah, 4/6 tells a lot about the mentality of Dart going into this match and also the type of deck that he's playing. Of course, he's playing a taunt deck, so he wants to be able to taunt up. If you were playing like a more of a Savage Roar, Druid of the Claw, Savage Roar, Force of Nature combo deck, he'd be going straight to Fate. He would be seeing blood right now, but he knows, oh, I'm in a pretty big advantage right now. I can just play it slow, and everything will go my way.
Okay, so with 6 mana, he's got to, Dart has got to play Innervate to play something really crazy here if he wants to go up to his Dr. Boom, but I don't think he'll do that. I think he'll just wait for next turn. Obviously, our Korean player is setting up for a Keeper of the Grove next turn, possibly with just, I don't know, I mean, he's got kind of a bad follow-up to it afterwards, to be honest, but he does have the 2 damage available to knock out that Druid of the Claw. But for Dart, though, I mean, Black Knight doesn't have a target. Harrison Jones will never have a target in this matchup. Swipe is irrelevant. Savage Roar doesn't get him anywhere. So I guess the default play is just, all right, well, let's use the Innervate and get Dr. Boom out.
Yeah, fortunately for the Korean player, this gives him an opportunity to somewhat come back into the game. Big BGH, which he does have in his hand right now, plus Keep the Grove kind of clears the board. But then we get in the problem with the boom bots again. The boom bots might be able to re-clear the board for Dart's side, and then he'll be able to play a big creature to respond to that. And both up, very good draw.
In a weird sort of way, though,
creatures that you want to pick up.
In a weird sort of way, him playing Dart playing Dr. Boom, though, allowed for a better play from the Korean side, though, because otherwise his mana was going to be super awkward. He only had that Keeper of the Grove. This at least allows him to play the Big Game Hunter on curve and get a valid target for it as well. So, I mean, it's not obviously turning the game around for him, but at least, you know, he might be a bit more survivable now. See if these boom bots go into the Big Game Hunter here. He's also got a Wrath possibility if he just wants a card here, but you know, it looks like he might do that.
Yeah, I think Wrath is a good option just because your hand isn't that great right now. You have a bunch of situational cards and a weak Harrison Jones, so you want to be able to draw into more cards later on. And in addition, you have your hand is kind of biased against in favor of removals. You have pretty much 3 removals: Wrath, Swipe, and Black Knight. Whereas you want just more threats to drop on the board. The way that you cede your advantage to your opponent is that you miss a drop on one of your turns, you can't develop the board any further, and then it lets your opponent essentially get 2 turns of board development. So Wrath for did he Wrath for 1 there?
No, he Wrath for 3 on the Keeper of the Grove, then ran a boom bot into Keeper of the Grove and decided to attack face with the other boom bot. So I'm really surprised about that because I would have figured it would have just been a 1 attack on or a 1 damage Wrath on the Big Game Hunter, clear it up guaranteed with a boom bot, grab your card and go home. If you happen to do damage to the Keeper of the Grove, maybe you can clear it out then, but otherwise don't worry about it. I'm a little confused at that play.
Yeah, I totally agree with your play, Kevin. That was a bit weird. It could have had a potential for a much higher reward, but the boom bot just didn't turn out well for him, and it ended up being a pretty horrible position.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the situation that I was describing. He's run out of threats to put on the board. He had to put on a very weak Harrison Jones, and now it's very possible for his opponent to come back into the game just because he has 2 Ancients of Lore in his hand right now, and he can pretty much clear this board.
Yeah, that's a pretty crazy play, and being able to innovate into the piloted shredder as well is super good here because it represents basically guaranteed value. Keeper of the Grove could potentially silence this here, and you could take it out without getting an extra two mana minion out there. Okay, quick aside. Is there any more satisfying feeling in the world than your opponent having a full board with a piloted shredder? You can't do anything about it. You kill piloted shredder, it gives them Doomsayer. You pass turn. Is there any better feeling in Hearthstone, period?
I think that about takes the cake, Kevin. I don't know. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. It's happened to me before, like, twice.
Yeah.
And both times I'm like, oh, wow, this is pretty good. Pretty happy right now with my RNG. I can't ask for anything better.
Literally the first time it happened, I didn't even consider Doomsayer as a possibility from Piloted Shredder. And as soon as it happened and he had 6 minions up and he was playing Cancer Mage, I loved it. I was just, I actually quit the game. I never quit on a winning streak, but I quit the game after that because I knew my Hearthstone career would never get better.
Yeah.
So he does end up...
Your head.
Yeah, there you go. So he does end up silencing the Piloted Shredder. And of course, when you top deck Ragnaros and you have an empty board in front of you, you're probably going to play Ragnaros.
Of course. It's the same concept as playing Dr. Boom, how Dart played Dr. Boom previously. If your opponent has a BGH, then okay, whatever. If he doesn't have a BGH, then oh, you just win the game.
Yeah, exactly.
A good top deck from Dart, Scenarius will be able to kind of tank the Ragnaros, perhaps. But he's going to be playing pretty far from behind right now. There's a possibility for a Black Knight to kind of get him back into the game, but he needs to be able to clear this Ragnaros pretty quickly.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think there's any problem right now with so what's the play here on the Korean side? Ancient of Lore, Wrath one of the 2/2s away, hope you kill the 5/8? Or is it just better to throw up a couple of taunts and just guard that Ragnaros?
I kind of like the taunts a little better. It develops the board a bit. It kind of lets you be vulnerable to Black Knight, but you're going to be vulnerable to Black Knight eventually. So, let's see. Oh, he does an entirely different play altogether.
Is he charged? He is? He's going for the 50-50 on the 5/8 scenarios. Now, of course, the problem is here, of course, is that we know that Dart is already holding a Savage Roar, and he's got a minion on board, so he's pretty darn close to lethal. Oh, and it does take out scenarios.
Back hits. Yeah, that was actually a pretty good play. It allows for the Rag to have a 50-50 on the 5/8, which is so much value from Ragnaros. And now we can see that Dart, he pretty much has this game locked up as a loss for him because he can't kill that Ragnaros. The Ragnaros is either going to kill a creature next turn, or it's going to just kill him straight out. I mean, also the Korean players also played around Black Knight, so again, that was very good as well.
Absolutely, and that's actually what I was going to mention. So, I mean, like, he could Senjin, he could swipe face, and he could clear the 4/2, or what would be a 4/1 Druid of the Claw with his hero power then. So that way, there's not more power on the board, and he has at least a reasonable potential that he could get in there and finish the game off next turn. But, I mean, we don't have deck lists, so we don't know exactly what's being run here. We know there's one Savage Roar, but we don't know if there's actually a Force of Nature in here, and some Druid decks are dropping it, so.
I feel like if you're going to run Savage Roar, you're probably going to have one Force of Nature, though.
Yeah.
So I think Dart definitely has one out, at least in his deck. But unfortunately, the Sludge Belcher kind of puts his hopes down. He will be able to use the Black Knight in order to clear the Sludge Belcher, but what then? He's going to be facing another Ragnaros shot, and then it's just going to be too much. And the Korean player can even heal himself to put him outside of Force of Nature Savage Roar range.
It's a very good point, but he actually didn't the past couple of turns whenever he was fully exposed to combo. Don't forget when he dropped that Ragnaros down there, he was only sitting at 10 health, 1 armor, which means he was still well within the combo range. All right, so Black Knight takes out the front end of Sludge Belcher. If he uses Savage Roar, he could clean it up with his face, potentially, and then hit for 3 to, or maybe clear out Harrison? But then he can't armor up and Rag kills him if it gets a 50-50. It's just really tough for Dart right now to find value here.
Yeah, I feel like you should probably save your Savage Roar, because if you expend it, then you pretty much have no way to win the game. Force of Nature Savage Roar, you have to use it for the combo because you're never going to win in the long game with your current hand right now.
Okay, well, he's debating what to do now. He's thinking about the Savage Roar. He does play it. You know, in regarding it, I think I agree with you. I think this is a decent play to ensure that you have 2 minions present on the board, and he actually does go to the face. Has Dart used both his swipes? I know he's used one.
Yeah, he's used both swipes. He had them kind of clogged up in his hand before where, again, he didn't have a lot of units. He just had the removals. So there's not going to be any swipes from Dart from this point forward.
And unfortunately, our Korean player is 1 damage off of being able to get the guaranteed kill, so now he just has a 50% chance to win the game with this hit. And it is, survey says, Ragnaros! It's Black Knight.
Oh, man.
Oh my god! Are you kidding me?
Force of nature. He's got to be hitting himself now.
Oh man, he draws the Force of Nature, which of course means that he's only got 7 damage available to him, 6 damage from Force of Nature, 1 damage from his hero power, and he is going to fall ever so slightly short. Even if he puts up Sludge Belcher right now, he has no potential to do anything else on top of it. I mean, he could potentially go down to 1 here, is what I think he's going to do, and clear the Harrison, and then just hope Rag hits the 1-2.
Here, another thing to consider is that in this type of ramp deck that Dart is running, I think you typically run 1 Force of Nature and 1 Savage Roar.
Okay.
So Dart might be even thinking, there's no way for me to get another another Savage Roar in this deck right now. So I have pretty much no outs.
Yep.
It's just a tough situation from me either way.
And unfortunately, that is going to be all she wrote. There's the pass. Dart goes down. Korea goes up here in the CSL versus E-CCA International Collegiate Hearthstone show match. Man, I was happy I got that right. I only had to look at the sheet once. And, of course, that sends Korea up 1-0.
Yeah, it's got to be a great feeling, Korea, especially because they beat USA's arguably best player, but definitely the most known player. So having that, pretty much beating their ace, essentially is going to be really good for the Korean team. They got to be thinking, okay, we are better than the Americans. We can take this match.
Yeah, well, I mean, knocking out Dart, like we said before, you talk about star power. This is one of North America's top players. He's a top 100 ranked player worldwide right now. He's obviously very solid. Never mind that whole medical career like you talked about before that he's embarking on at the same time. I'm sure he was just in the middle of some sort of a clinical trial right now, is what I like to imagine. He's sitting there furiously on his iPad while he's trying to save someone's life. So thank you, Dart, for being a hero at the same time. All right, well, we're going to move on to the next match here, and this is going to be Genius from the University of Washington. And he is, once again, I apologize, I'm looking for an anglicized version of this name. I don't know, so I'm going to say our second competitor from the Korean squad is coming out. And on the side of Genius for the US, his banned deck was a Hunter, and available to him is a Paladin, a Rogue, and a Warlock, and believe it or not, one of only 2 Paladins on the US side. His opponent is carrying a Rogue, a Shaman, and a Warrior. He had a Warlock banned out.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to see this match in particular, just because they have such different decks. They're both carrying a Rogue, and one player has a Paladin, the other has a Shaman. These are decks I really want to see. I'm getting a little bored of seeing Handlock, Warrior, and Druid pretty much in every single tournament. Yeah. And it's just going to be a breath of fresh air right now in this next match.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, especially with Rogue. We have the potential of a Rogue mirror match, and I'm struggling to think of the last time that I saw a tournament Rogue mirror match, to be totally honest.
Yeah, to be honest, I can't seem to recall this ever happening in GVG, so
yeah.
This might be the first time. This might be the first time in pretty much a month.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, ever since the Kazakhstan Auctioneer was nerfed, people have been kind of straying away from Rogues. Rogues just, they don't have a solid archetype right now to go with, but there is some promise. For example, there's been some players that have hit #1 with Rogue on the European server. A deck that actually included a Cobalt Geomancer of all things.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's just the last thing you expect is a Cobalt Geomancer.
Yeah?
They use their Blood Mace Thanos, and they're like, oh, there's no way they could have spell power again, and Cobalt Geomancer comes out and just ruins your day.
That's clever, and any of the spells that Rogue runs with it would just be immensely powerful at that point. That's cool. Okay, I'm going to have to look into that deck. Thank you for letting me know about that. I mean, we've seen that Sprint is a card again, which is crazy. But I mean, I love the fact, though, that the Gadgetzan nerf was, of course, not directed at Rogue, even though it ended up becoming a Rogue nerf. But basically, they were like, yeah, Gadgetzan's 6 now. And everyone was like, why? Why is Gadgetzan 6? And we're like, spare parts. Don't worry about it, but we're flooding the game with a bunch of 1-mana spells. So Gadgetzan just can't be 5 anymore. So I liked the thinking about it. And I actually am a big fan of the spare parts. I love the way that they get integrated into games right now. And I know there's a little bit of randomness that goes along with them, but it seems like the kind that you can strategize around. So I'm actually a fan of them.
Yeah, me too. Spare parts, even though it might not be intended, they were kind of a buff to mage as well, giving Antonidas something to combo with. Antonidas into the cloaking spare part is probably one of the most powerful plays in the game.
Yes, it's so much fun.
It's like super Gadgetzan Auctioneer plus conceal. Just the best that you can hope for.
Well, I just love the fact that almost any mech in that deck eventually will grant you a fireball, is what it amounts to if you play it long enough. And that in and of itself, like, whenever people tell me, whenever I'm playing my mage deck and they're like, oh, well, you know, I don't have all the parts, I don't have Antonidas, what should I switch Antonidas with? And I'm like, don't. Do whatever you can to craft Antonidas. I don't care if it's not the best deck in the game right now, it's the most fun you can have at the end of games. Just one card sitting and cycling fireballs. It's just pure bliss.
Yeah, even though it might not necessarily be the best deck in the game, I think like every competitive player, when GVG first came out, they went to try this Antonidas plus spare part combo because it just has so much potential, and it has the potential to be so much fun.
Oh yeah, and I've probably played, I don't know, I've probably played 75, 100 games with the Mech Mage deck, something like that. I've only pulled off the true dream Antonidas spare parts, just crushing death blow like 4 or 5 times, but the times it has gone off have been amazing. All right, guys, so like I said, we are going to move into the second set here. Again, if you're wondering why we're here, what we're doing, we are live at Twin Galaxies Live here in North Hollywood. We are, of course, casting the E-CCA versus CSL International US versus Korea Collegiate Hearthstone show match. 6 players from the US, 6 players from Korea, all going up against each other in best of 3s. At the end of the day, we will see which team has taken home the most wins. Of course, there is a potential that they will split right down the middle 3-3, but we'll talk about that when the time comes. But for now, we're just waiting on the next set. It looks like everyone is jumping and our players are prepping. They just haven't accepted the match quite yet. All right.
Yeah, so
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Kevin, what were the decks that were banned for each player? Do you know?
Yes. So on the ban side for the US, Genius had Hunter banned, and our Korean player had Warlock banned at the moment. So yet another Warlock ban for the Koreans. Or against the Koreans.
As we were talking about before these matches started, the American players tended to just ban Warlock and they banned Warrior, which are regarded as the 2 most strong classes in the Western scene. But the Koreans have been banning all sorts of stuff. And okay, I think our game is actually about to start, and it's going to be Warlock against Rogue.
I'm so happy! He's leading off with Rogue! Like, I looked at his decks and I was like, Rogue, Shaman, Warrior. Oh, okay, well, this is going to be Warrior, isn't it? No, it's Rogue, and I can't wait to see what it has. We can, of course, see the Warlock, though, for Genius is, of course, a handlock. He's already got Ancient Watcher, Earthen Ring, and Siphon Soul in hand. We'll see what he ends up mulligan. Oh, no, he actually went through his mulligan already, so that's his opening hand, and that's not the greatest hand in the world.
Yeah, even though I'm really excited to see Rogue, my excitement is a bit tempered just because of the fact that he's facing Handlock.
Yeah.
And Handlock was a deck that traditionally stomped on Rogue even before the Gadgetzan nerfs,
yes.
And I believe after the Gadgetzan nerfs, it's going to even struggle even more.
Well, because not only do you have the nerf to Rogue, but I believe that Handlock got a decent buff with Dark Bomb over Soulfire right now, especially because Soulfire is now 1 mana, but not having the threat of any sort of discards gives your Handlock deck so much more consistency, and that with Antique Healbot on top of it means that you can essentially just heal out of almost any problems that you would encounter. So I agree with you. I think it's going to have more problems than in the past. I don't even care that I saw the Handlock. I was just happy to see a Rogue. Come on, Monk, give me my fun for at least 20 seconds. That's all I ask, man.
All right. All right, you can have your fun, but I'm just going to be a pessimist here. I'm going to say there's already a Twilight Drake in the Handlock's hand right now, the perfect turn 4 play. How is the Rogue going to deal with that, Kevin?
You're absolutely, so like I have played Handlock more than any other deck in the game by far. I have played it many hundreds of games. I adore it to death. And there is nothing more fun than turn 4 Twilight Drake than watching your Rogue opponent go like, backstab, preparate, eviscerate, SI7 agent, and they're like, boom, got your Twilight Drake, what you gonna do? And then next turn it's just Mountain Giant and they just concede the game. So
I know the feeling.
Yeah.
Now we saw a turn 3 SI agent from the Korean player and a turn 4 Twilight Drake in response. Now this is kind of like one of those times where Soulfire might be a bit better.
Yeah.
Because Soulfire was 0 mana and it would have allowed you to clear the SI agent. The SI agent actually presents some of a threat because with the 3 powers that the SI agent provides, you can potentially kill the Twilight Drake here and there, whereas if you had the Soulfire, you'd be able to just ignore that threat altogether. I'm not sure if he's able to kill this Twilight Drake right now, and I think he only has is that a Sabotage?
He can if he spell powers, backstab, and then deadly poison. He would have 3, 6, yeah, he would have exactly 9. So he would be able to knock out the Twilight Drake, but that does, of course, just like we were talking about before, that's a lot of cards he's already expended. He gets decent value because he'll get 1 more charge out of his deadly poison, but that's backstab already gone, so.
Yeah, the SI agent will trade for the Twilight Drake, and fortunately for the Rogue player, there's not already another Twilight Drake or another Mountain Giant that's coming up. The Handlock does have a good play in Sludge Belcher, but we'll just see what he draws.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the play here. I don't see anything else that's obvious. You don't want a heal bot sitting on 26 health, of course, and the 3/3 body doesn't really do anything. It just gets wiped out by the 3/1 dagger from the Rogue. So, yeah, Sludge Belcher is probably the best opportunity here. There is potentially a case to be made for, let's see how many cards on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Maybe there's a case for tapping and just Ancient Watcher and not really doing anything else, but I agree with you on the Sludge Belcher play.
Yeah, you know what I just thought of, Kevin? The thing is, Rogue decks these days, they don't run sap anymore. So that's going to be a huge problem for Rogues to deal with Handlocks. If you can't sap your opponent's minions, it's going to be a loss of a potential tempo play that you could do.
Absolutely, because sending a Sludge Belcher back is always nice. Oh, hey, or Mortal Coil off the top, and then still have 2 mana left over for an Ancient Watcher. You know, that's always good when you tap into the perfect removal for the situation. So, Blood Mage Thalnos goes down, a card for both sides, of course, because that's what Blood Mage does, and the Mortal Coil gave a card to our Handlock. And it looks like he's just going to Azure Drake for now. Does he have any follow-up? Nope, just sits there with the 4/4 on board.
Oh, Mountain Giant, pretty good pickup. I think he would kind of like an owl in order to kill this Azure Drake, but I think he'll be pretty happy with this with this Mountain Giant.
I think he's more than fine because he can Mountain Giant and he can taunt it up, of course, and taunt up that 4/5 sitting next to it. Just looking at what the Rogue has, couple of Fana Knives, yeah, really nothing that will be able to efficiently deal with this taunt. He's got another, I guess if he sits for a turn, he can get a Ragnaros out there and hope for some really lucky hits, but that's about as good as it gets.
Interesting choice to taunt up both minions. It could be considered that you might want to not taunt up the Mountain Giant in order to protect it with the Ancient Watcher, but I guess our Genius player is, or Genius rather, is a bit scared of perhaps a burst combo damage. Like, there's different types of rogue decks right now. There's decks that kind of rely on minions, and others that rely on burst. And you kind of have to feel out what kind of deck you're playing against before you go too aggressive or not defensive enough, I'd say.
This is not terrible for the Rogue, though, and I definitely agree with you, I have to say. This is not terrible for the Rogue. He can clear the Mountain Giant. He will be able to leave just basically... No, I mean, he could even use a second Fana Knives here if he would want to and completely clear the board. SI7 agent is going to knock that Mountain Giant down to an 8/4. He'll trade into it with his 4/4 and still have enough to be able to smack the Ancient Watcher away with his face.
Oh, something interesting I just noticed was that the Korean player picked up his SI agent and targeted it towards his Azure Drake. Do you think that was more because he wanted to kind of fake his opponent out, or he wanted to he wanted to say, like, hey, I have a cold blood in my hand right now. You better be scared.
That's got to be the case, because otherwise you would never accidentally do that. So I agree with you. I don't know what card he's trying to pretend it is. The only card that he would have easily been able to target himself would be a Cold Blood. So yeah, I agree with you. Now, though, turn 7, the plays here are not amazing. He can coin Ragnaros. He's got more board clear available to him. He doesn't have that... he doesn't have that spell power out there unless he goes with the Azure Drake right now and then tries to combo it into another spell. But the only one he could reasonably use right now, unless he draws into something, would be Coin Fan and Knives. So, and that doesn't represent a ton of value for him.
Not too great. He finally draws his BGH, which is kind of like the one good part about his hand right now. And he has a lot of cards, so it's going to be a fairly long game. Oh, Dr. Boom. Of course it's Dr. Boom. Why wouldn't Dr. Boom be in this deck, right?
Absolutely. Dr. Boom's in every deck. Dr. Boom's awesome. Dr. Boom is actually awesome, and he is basically in every deck right now. But I think our rogue play right now, he's going to knock out the 4-2 and just pass turn. There are potentials where he could coin Deadly Poison again, flood the board with 1/1s, and then hit the 3-4. But then, of course, he just leaves himself open to any of the number of Shadow Flames and Hellfires that our Warlock would have.
Yeah, speaking of Shadow Flame, the handlock draws a Shadow Flame right now. He has a lot of options, but none of them are that great right now. I'd say he wants kind of more minions that you can just play on the board right now, such as more Sludge Belchers, perhaps a Loatheb, and of course more Twilight Drakes and Mountain Giants. Who wouldn't want those, right?
Right, of course. But I mean, yeah, he has only hit half of those. He does have both his Moltens in hand, but he's not been taking a significant amount of damage. Pretty much all the damage he's taken has just been self-tap damage to grab cards. So yeah, without his minions, he's looking at aggressively using board clear. He was hovering over Siphon Soul for a long time. Of course, he's going to kick himself if he uses that Siphon Soul, because next turn, of course, we know there is the threat of Dr. Boom or Ragnaros or something like that.
I think he's kind of suspecting the kind of deck that the Rogue is right now, and it's going to be a semi-popular Rogue deck that plays, of course, the Dr. Boom, the Ragnaros, and potentially Alexstrasza and Prince Trade Galawix. And he probably wants to save the Dr. Boom, or he wants to save those Siphon Souls for those cards in particular. So I think a good play would have been to use the Farseer on the Sludge Belcher, but I think this also works. If he used the Farseer on the Sludge Belcher and then Dark Bombs, he could have cleared that thing, or he could have cleared the Violet Teacher and then had a resulting 3-4. But I guess this works.
Yeah, I suppose so, but he didn't really get a whole lot done with that Shadow Flame. I guess it was a case of like, well, it was the best that he had available to him, and it's not like a Rogue is ever going to be in a position where they're going to spam out like 5 or 6 minions on board, so you don't have to worry about Supermass clear with it, and most of what they put down you can clear with Hellfire. So now I'm talking myself out of this, and I'm saying, well, I guess that wasn't so bad. But initially you think of that Shadow Flame there, it doesn't completely kill the Violet Teacher, so I don't know if it was the best value, and I think I would have liked your Dark Bomb play better.
I think he was actually considering it because he was hovering over those cards, but now he's in a similarly bad position where I'm not sure what he can do right now. Again, he has the Dark Bomb to clear a 3/3 creature, he has the Argus, but none of those are particularly strong offensive plays. They don't develop the board that much, and it gives your opponent a turn in which to develop their board, in which you have to respond, and then it can potentially just cycle through and snowball out of control for the handlock player.
Well, you do know that both Fan and Knives are gone, so a lot of basic spell power AoE is out of the Rogue's hand, which means that maybe you can feel a little bit more confident with the Ironbeak Owl here and clear the Drake that way. Looks like he's not even going to worry about that, and he might save it for something else a little bit later. But I think he can be pretty liberal with that card now.
Yeah, I'm not sure what in the Rogue's deck that you would Ironbeak Owl besides maybe Trade Prince Galawix.
Yeah.
So this Ancient Watcher seems to be a perfect target for the Ironbeak Owl.
Well, we'll see if he does this. Just going to use the Dark Bomb from now, and sends that over to the SI7 agent and clears it up. So we're still in kind of a weird spot. Drawing an Eviscerate isn't terrible. It's going to give him a clear option here. And that Eviscerate, of course, will be able to do, he doesn't just want to go after Sylvanas with it.
Yeah, he wants to clear Sylvanas, but at the same time, he doesn't want the Sylvanas to get a lot of value from stealing a Drake. I guess he could just hit the resulting Drake with his dagger, and then play one of his big creatures such as Ragnaros or Dr. Boom.
Yeah, I
and
agree.
that wouldn't be such a bad play.
He could potentially, I mean, he does have a Blade Flurry in hand, so Blade Flurry and then attacking into the Sylvanas or something like that with the Twilight Drake as a possibility. Other than that, I mean,
I feel like Blade Flurry is a card that you kind of want to save, though. You generally only run one of those in your deck, and Handlock does have the potential to just put up a lot of creatures, such as, for example, like 2 Molten Giants, an Owl, Defender of Argus, all cards that we see in, wow.
And he is going to do the full, wait a second, and he's just going to eviscerate it. All right. I mean, that was a pretty expensive clear right there. And now, especially because our Handlock's going to come back and be like, oh, you just dealt 9 damage to me with that Spell Power Blade Flurry? Okay, Mountain Giants. Or, I'm sorry, Molten Giants.
Yeah, and we see exactly, your opponent's going to have 2 Molten Giants, probably taunted up, and you're not going to have a board clear to deal with it. And in addition, again, we see the Rogue's hand is kind of lopsided right now. It's lopsided in favor of creatures and less in removals, where ideally you kind of want a balance between the two, as we talked about in the last series.
All right, well, there's Molten Giant number 1, there's number 2. Defender of Argus is going to be right behind that, and now he's got 2 big 9/9s with 14 health. And let's see, 9, 18, 20, 23. That is lethal next turn. Does he have anything that can efficiently deal with this? No, he just throws right down, takes no time at all. Bigging Hunters out one of the 9/9s and throws down Dr. Boom for the other one.
Wow, a double BGH deck from the Handlock player, from Genius. This is getting a lot more common lately, where we see just 2 BGHs being run in every deck, whether it be from Druid, Warrior, or Handlock.
And I actually like it, to be honest. Like, Big Game Hunter just has so many valid targets right now. Because Dr. Boom is in every deck, you know you are always going to have great value for it. Because in many cases, just due to the RNG nature, the Boom bot isn't necessarily going to hit the Big Game Hunter all the time, so it has a reasonable chance at clearing basically the entire kit of Dr. Boom. So running 2 of them right now makes a lot of sense to me. Maybe not on ladder as much. I can understand that if you're hitting a ton of explicit aggro and stuff like that. But in tournament decks, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we see a second Shadow Flame from the Handlock player that he just drew. And this deck, now it seems to be more of like an anti-control deck, with running 2 Shadow Flames, which is something we don't see very often these days. People are more leaning towards 2 Hellfires for anti-aggro, for anti-paladin, instead of those Shadow Flames. But with 2 Shadow Flames, 2 BGH, this deck was definitely intended to be run as an anti-control deck.
And there's the antique heal bot right afterwards, as if to say, "Aha, jerk!" And it's going to work out pretty well, because a Handlock at 20 health is just not going to die, especially with this kind of a board. Where does the Boom bot go? It only does 1 damage to Big Game Hunter. Is that not the most frustrating feeling in the world? And he just instantly concedes.
Yeah, nothing he can do right there. I think this game was again decided by the fact that he went for the Tinker's Oil plus Blade Flurry play that put his opponent in Molten Giant range. With the play that the Korean player did, he had to have been thinking, oh, I just have to bet there's no Molten Giants. That's the only way I can win. Whereas I feel like he could have played a bit safer than that, and he could have gone for a more stable play with Dr. Boom, with Ragnaros, for example, and still played a fairly decent, fairly winnable game from then on.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Like, I wouldn't have minded the Blade Flurry explicitly if it had been a small one, not put his opponent down to Molten Giant range. Maybe if he had used it just once, clear most of the minions, run his Twilight Drake in, and then reserve some of his other spells for later, he has a little bit better chance. But in any case, that was really over-aggressive and ended up costing him the game, I agree. So now that his Rogue deck is down, there is a Shaman and a Warrior deck available to him. He knows he's going against Handlock right now. What do you think he's going to play?
I think it's going to be the Shaman. Earth Shocks, Hexes, that's pretty much the story. And it's going to be even better if he runs cards such as such as mana tide totem, draw extra cards early on. Very difficult for the handlock to deal with. It's gonna be better. It's gonna be better just because he knows it's gonna be a handlock, so he can mulligan correctly. A lot of the times, the difference is between Shaman and Warlock is whether you know it's Zoo or if it's handlock. And if you know it's handlock, you can just afford to keep cards such as that mana tide, such as that hex that you normally can't keep against Zoo, and your win rate goes up tremendously from there on out.
Absolutely. So looks like they are jumping into the game right now, so we're going to see what decks were chosen. And I do have the names of all of our players as well, of course. So the first match, if you're wondering, the player that knocked out Dart, that was Yoon-Hee Soo. And right now, we are, of course, seeing Genius on the U.S. side go up against Chae Sung-jae. So Chae Sung-jae is our Korean player, if you guys are all curious. And he, of course, gets off to a very strong start. Looks like we're already a couple of turns in. Our handlock player has just been tapping and grabbing cards for a couple of seconds. Looks like he's thinking about coining out a Twilight Drake right now. On the other hand, man, you talk about minions that stick around, and there's nothing better out there than a Haunted Creeper and a Harvest Golem. Oh! Earthshock. Oh. Good stuff.
Well, second Earthshock.
Oh, yeah, he did have one.
So now our Korean player has a very difficult decision right now. Which Earthshock does he use? And it's going to be the one that he top decked. He's going to be like, oh, well, I just top decked this. It's going to make his opponent more frustrated, perhaps even more on tilt. And he's not going to play the Feral Spirits. He's going to just totem instead. And he's thinking, oh, I don't want to overly develop into Hellfire range. I don't want to just like lose instantly because of a really good Hellfire. Good play.
Definitely. So, yeah, I mean, and of course, you know, that Feral Spirit against a handlock, once they've already used some of their board clear, can be surprisingly powerful, because if you use it later on in the game, those 2-3 wolves, more often than not, are going to be absorbing giant hits, you know? So if you can use it at the right time and not waste it now, like you said, and set up the big blowout for the handlock, you can actually set up for some pretty big damage mitigation later on.
Yeah, not only that, they combo very well with the Flame Tongue Totems. Not only can they absorb giant hits, they can kill giants by themselves with an additional Flame Tongue bonus. We see a Black Knight in the Shaman deck right now. Not a card that we see at all in Western Shaman decks, but this deck is clearly geared towards being anti-handlock right now. Black Knight, Earthshock, Hexes, all very good anti-handlock cards. Now, there's three components of beating handlock. First is the removal. You have the Hex, the Earthshock, and the Black Knight. Second is card draw. Oh, and a BGH. Oh my god, so anti-handlock. So of course, there's the removal, there's the card draw, which you need to keep up the number of cards that you draw with the handlock player. And then there's the finisher combo, which you need to burst through the handlock player before he can use Mountain Giants that he can activate, or Molten Giants rather, that he can activate. And we see two of those, or at least one of those components that the Shaman has in spades. The Black Knight, the BGH, the Hex, the Earthshock. He's going to have so many of these removals. Now he just has to stabilize. He has to draw those finishers, and he might need he might be able to even skip the card draw portion.
You know, and going back to Black Knight a little bit there as part of your discussion, like, if I was Jim Cramer right now, I'd probably say to buy Black Knight. Like Black Knight is going to be on the way up a little bit here soon. It's fallen out of favor over the past few weeks as people were largely going against it, but like, I've seen a decent resurgence, at least in the competitive scene, of more and more taunts recently, just because it has been taken out of the meta, and we have seen more of that. Well, if you don't need two of the big swing card removals, one Black Knight, one BGH, dump both of them into BGH. They tend to have more value right now anyway. But I think there's a case to be made for Black Knight coming back into relevance a little bit here. I think it's just too darn good, especially with the way the meta sits right now and is developing, and we're seeing a couple of more taunts the past week or so.
Yeah, for example, I was just running Ramp Druid, having very good success because no one was running Black Knights.
Yep.
But as Black Knights become more phased in, that deck is not going to be a problem as viable. A Dr. Boom from the Shaman, which is a pretty good target for a BGH if the handlock had one, but he just used it.
Was that just a little bit of a mind game too from our Korean player Chae Sung-jae? Because he decided not to attack with his Haunted Creeper, of course preventing his opponent from going to 17, which would mean he can't play Molten Giant, right? But Molten Giant would be fine because obviously he has a BGH ready for it to be able to switch back momentum. So is he basically saying, I don't have any way to deal with this, I'm really afraid of Molten Giant right now, oh gosh, don't play Molten Giant? Because it seems like he's got every card ready to knock it down.
I think it's more that I'm not sure, but I think it's more that he doesn't want Molten Giants to be played eventually, because he knows it's a very good possibility that the Handlock will be able to deal with this Dr. Boom, and then next turn he may be able to play like a 4-mana Molten Giant, because a 7-mana Molten Giant isn't that scary typically. If you just play a 7-mana Molten Giant on this type of board, your opponent will just hex it or BGH it or...
I agree with you, I do, which is why I was wondering then why he reserved the one attack from the Haunted Creeper, to be totally honest, you know? It just didn't seem to make any sense to me, but who knows?
Yeah, I just feel like he might be thinking a few more turns ahead. But the worst feeling in the world is when you use a BGH, and then Dr. Boom comes out. Well,
yeah.
Bloodlust.
I was about to say, hold on, Earthshock #1 plus Bloodlust, is that it? Is that lethal? I think it is.
I think that's it.
Oh my god, and he just uses one of the boom bots to clear that up so he can get some extra damage in somewhere. Please hit face because that's hilarious. Come on. Aww.
You know, Twitch chat must be going crazy. They must be like, oh, this guy's deck is crazy.
I loved it though. Anti-control Bloodlust? That's awesome. He was, I guess we only saw one BGH there, so we don't know if he was running a second, but BGH, Black Knight, both, he hit his Earthshocks early and he ran into a Bloodlust. That was pretty much a perfect game from the Shaman, and we are tied up 1-1 in this best of 3.
Yeah, the Shaman drew his burst, the Bloodlust, and I was kind of wondering what kind of burst he was going to choose. You either kind of run Doomhammer, Bloodlust, Alakir, or sometimes in rare circumstances, Wind Fury or Wind Speaker. But there's so many great options from the Shaman player to burst your opponent down. Thankfully, the Shaman drew one, and we're going to see a game 3.
That's right, and so Genius has available to him now that his handlock is down a Paladin and a Rogue deck. So you were talking about wanting to see a Shaman Paladin matchup at some point. This could very well be your chance, though, of course. That's just... I mean, you're just going to be trading Lightning Storm, Equality Consecration, board clear, board clear, board clear. Like, I think we're going to see more minions die in a Paladin Shaman matchup than any other matchup in the game.
Yeah, and then Bolivar 4-Dragon comes out and it becomes like an 18-7, right?
Oh my god, that's so much fun. That card is an awesome blowout sometimes, but there's almost no more disheartening card in the game to have silenced or knocked out quick.
An 18-7 becoming a 1-7, probably
I know.
The worst feeling in the world.
I know.
Maybe even worse than having your opponent play a Dr. Boom after you play a BGH. Who knows?
that Dr. Boom after the BGH was pretty clutch, though. I like that. All right, so he's got, I'm just looking at the other pieces. There's a lot of your normal Shaman pieces. I want to know what he's taken out of this deck to assemble what we've seen so far, you know? Because we've seen a lot of decent legendaries, he's running a lot of the normal Shaman cards, but then he is running things like Black Knight, so I want to see where he cut corners. All right, on our Rogue side, though, nothing weird. Shiv, Backstab, Sludge Belcher, Deadly Poison. We're not quite sure what what form this Rogue deck is going to take yet.
Yeah, but pretty decent cards from the Rogue side, and pretty decent cards from the Shaman side. They pretty much got pretty good hands, both of them. The Rogue is going to have Deadly Poisons, Backstabs to deal with the Shaman early aggression, whereas the Shaman has all the creatures that he wants, in addition to a Flame Tongue Totem, which could get a lot of value from the sticky creatures that he's going to put on the board, such as the Harvest Golems and Frostwolves.
Oh man, and Genius is thinking about shiving right now. Just so we can get that card and get the totem cleared out. But of course, this is the fun of playing a lot of minions against a rogue. Regardless, it's going to draw a lot of cards from your opponent. And of course, I'm just looking at the Shaman side and what looks like to be a likely Harvest Golem play next turn. He would have rather had that Shiv for a full clear with that Deadly Poison.
Yeah, I think he was just debating whether he wanted to use the Fan of Knives or the Shiv.
Yeah.
Both were good options, but I think the way his mind worked was that he thought that the Fan would get more value later on. Of course, it's a Shaman, so he's going to have a lot of minions on the board later. So it's a very good idea. Yeah. Unfortunately, the Shiv might be better now because he could backstab Deadly Poison and then either Shiv or Fan. Although I guess either Shiv or Fan works in this case.
Yeah, but I mean, nothing's amazing here, and that's fine. I mean, Backstab gives him a 1/1. He clears one minion off the board. That's actually better than I was looking at before. I hadn't seen all of his plays. So that's actually really good, and the Rogue's actually in a pretty decent spot. So having used Feral Spirit last turn means he is down to 2 mana now. And it looks like he's just going to go ahead and clear out the Violet Teacher here with a Rockbiter weapon, and that's it. Maybe Zombie Chow? Yeah.
Yeah, Zombie Chow, here we go. And the funny thing is that the Shaman deck from this game and the Shaman deck from last game look like two completely different decks. I mean, this deck is running all your typical Shaman cards plus a Zombie Chow.
Yep.
It looks to be pretty even anti-aggro, I dare say. But then the last game we saw BGH, we saw Bloodlust, we saw Black Knight.
Right, which is why I'm saying, what? I want to see this deck list. I want to know what cards he's been cutting. I'm going to put a question out there. Have we seen a Hex yet? There's got to be Hex at Shaman, right? There has to be Hex. You have to play Hex. I haven't seen one. And because this deck's been weird enough yet, I'm not going to believe it until I see it. And there's our Bloodlust.
Well, there's the Bloodlust. And are we going to see a Hex drop? Nope. Lightning Storm. That's not the card that's being cut.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to play BGH, you're going to have the Hexes, because I feel like in most cases, Hex is just usually a better BGH.
I agree with you 100%, but I haven't seen one, and I don't know what the Shaman deck is yet to fit in Black Knight and Zombie Chows everywhere and Bloodlust on top of it, so we'll figure that out in a bit. Back on the Rogue side, though, normal spells available to him, of course. Not the fun that Rogue would have been a little while ago with Preps and Gadgetzan sitting there, but he still has options. You can't sap a Twilight Drake because that's free cards. He doesn't want to play as Eviscerate unless he gets unless he can play it second. Otherwise, he's wasting it. There's just not a lot of amazing plays available for the Rogue. He can clear the board with what he has there with his weapon and the Blood Mage, draw a card, and maybe just go into an easy Sludge Belcher afterwards. But nope. He's using cards.
That's interesting. I would have liked for him to develop the Belcher a bit more. Use the Deadly Poison plus the Violet Teacher token to clear the Azure Drake.
Yeah.
I just feels like it kind of gives him a stronger board overall. Ooh, Dr. Boom comes on the board, and that's also a card that you really don't want to sap. It's just essentially giving your opponent more boom bots.
That's why Dr. Boom's so good. It is. Is there a card that's less counterable in the game than Dr. Boom right now? Because my opinion is that Dr. Boom is the most uncounterable card. Because like I said before, Mirror Entity, you only get a 7/7. You decide to use any removal spells against it, you only kill one thing, or you're AoEing and doing damage to yourself. I don't think there is a more uncounterable card in the game than Dr. Boom. Wow.
You could make that argument. Dr. Boom goes back, and we might even see more boom bots later in the game.
A fun effect, because Dr. Boom is so much, though, some of my favorite moments in games are Dr. Boom, there's 4 boom bots out, 2 on each side, and they just start bouncing between the boom bots, the damage between them. It's so cute. I call it my fireworks. So he could have, okay, so Lightning Storm is going to get him a decent amount of value, and should make it so that the boom bots have a reasonable chance to clear the front half of Sludge Belcher. That does keep him overloaded for next turn, which doesn't appear to be too big of a problem. It would only prevent him from playing Dr. Boom.
Yeah, your opponent is pretty much running out of gas. The Rogue is running out of gas right now, so just being able to clear the board, it seems to be a very good option right now. Does he get the spell power? No, no spell power totem.
No.
But this feels fine.
Yeah, so he's hoping for 3 damage. Nope, he got 2. So he got the worst of both of those. Missed the 50-50 chance and missed the 25% chance. It looks like, oh, well, of course he had Flame Tongue left. That's the obvious play, and he will be able to clear up Sludge Belcher entirely.
Now the card advantage is starting to add up for the Shaman player. I believe he has 6 cards to 4 of the Rogues, and none of these Rogue cards are even seem that good. A BGH, I guess that's okay for Dr. Boom again when it comes out again, but this board isn't looking too strong from the Rogue player.
Absolutely not. With 6 mana, Azure Drake is the likely play. He could throw out a Haunted Creeper and a Harvest Golem if he just wanted to make a really stout board or something like that, but I think this is fine. And he draws another Lightning Storm. Monk, we have not seen a Hex. We have not seen a Hex. I am holding to my no Hex theory right now.
You know what else we haven't seen? We haven't seen a Fire Elemental.
You're right. And so he's cut Fire Elemental and he's cut Hex. Arguably like the 2 highest value Shaman cards, and he's about to win 2 games with it.
Well, we're not sure. I feel like we have to see more of this deck, but
I agree.
This deck does seem like a deck that has like 35 cards in it.
It does, but I mean, so many obvious cards are just not popping up. You're right about the Fire Elemental, but I am thinking more and more that I am right about Hex. Now, unfortunate for him, unfortunate for the Rogue player, of course, though, he was like, oh yeah, we got that Lightning Storm out of hand, no problem. There's a fairly low chance that he'll have a second one. He does have the second one. So if he rolls Spell Power here, this is, could potentially be a board clear. And no, he rolls Taunt.
It's still right. I feel like Spell Power Totem would have almost locked out the game if he got high rolls on most of the cards, but this will be acceptable. Let's see what he clears. I guess that's okay.
Yeah, it's not bad.
No, he cleared the SI agent, and he did a lot of damage to all the other minions, and he has a lot of sticky minions on the board. So next turn, it's very likely that he'll be able to take out, just clean up the Azure Drake and clean up the Violet Teacher.
Okay, well, and of course the Shaman still has massive value hanging around because not only does he have two huge high-end cards in Dr. Boom and Alakir, he's got his Bloodlust behind that as well. So there's Dr. Boom. We could potentially have some Dr. Boom back and forth shenanigans here. Let's see. So with 8 mana available, this is a pretty stout board, I have to say. The Rogue, just through the nature of Dr. Boom, actually has a board that has to be respected here, though.
Now, we know that the Shaman runs a BGH, but unfortunately, right now, at least, it's nowhere to be seen. And he hasn't drawn a Hex yet, as you mentioned.
As I've mentioned annoyingly like 12 times by now. But, all right, so he can clear, what are the likely culprits here? He can take out the Twilight Drake, that's no problem. He can even Defender of Argus potentially to keep the Zombie Chow alive. Well, to keep the Zombie Chow alive, clean out the Earthen Ring Farseer, and then go after the 4/2. Then with the available mana he has, he does nothing because that leaves him with no play, so that's probably terrible. This is a tricky position, believe it or not, for the Shaman. Or just what is the best value play?
Yeah, I feel like the two most threatening minions on the board right now that you can easily clear are the Twilight Drake and the Azure Drake and the Violet Teacher. But instead, yeah, he goes to clear both of those things, I think.
Yeah.
In addition to the Farseer, I think.
What's up?
And now yeah, he just basically clears everything except Dr. Boom because Dr. Boom is so sticky, so hard to clear and get good value out of it. I think the Rogue will have to expend his BGH right now.
He probably has to.
In order to combo with the SI agent, but the thing is, he knows his opponent has a Dr. Boom in his hand right now, so.
Right.
No, he's just gonna play the SI agent naked on the board. Just hope that the SI agent puts up enough pressure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he knows. Oh, and there's BGH on the Shaman side, so he's going to be pretty happy with that. That's a good clear. Haunted Creeper could follow this, and he could easily Loatheb just to prevent multiple spells. I mean, at this point, the Rogue is only drawing one card at a time, but it's very, very possible that he could be drawing purely spells, so that would actually negate him from being able to play both his cards next turn, essentially. So it's not terrible.
Oh, you know what I just thought of? I think the card that the Shaman cut is the Lightning Bolt / Crackle. People are running either one of those right now, but we haven't seen either from the Shaman player.
Yes.
It seems like a much more likely candidate than either of the two cards we suggested, Hex or Fire Elemental. Hex and Fire Elemental just seem like such staple Shaman cards that I doubt those are the ones being cut.
Yep. Definitely. I mean, I would tend to agree with you as well, but so far, I mean, I'm just naming cards I haven't seen that I typically see in Shaman decks, and none of them have hit yet, and we're pretty far into game number 2 now. Okay, so with a draw preparation, that's a dead card for the Rogue completely. He would have to cast a 5-mana spell for his next spell to be 3 mana cheaper next turn, so it doesn't work out for him. So the Rogue is doing the right thing in clearing the board here because he was just hoping to eventually have enough damage to be able to push through to the face. Will he get the hit? Ooh, that was about as bad as it gets for Dr. Boom to hit that. This will be 4 damage to the face for the Rogue here.
Yeah, he can't play either of those cards because playing BGH would just lose him the game if his opponent plays Dr. Boom. And preparation is, again, as you said, a dead draw. He needs to draw Sprint next turn. Most of these decks run 2 sprints these days. So with preparation and a sprint, it's possible that he can come back into the game.
Hitting
such a draw.
Hitting that spell power, or I'm sorry, hitting the health totem though was just so good for the shaman because it allows him the flexibility using Loatheb to clear up the minion on board while still staying out of dagger range. Of course, SI7 agent is going to clear that up, but there's not too much that the rogue player can do behind this. He's still reserving that BGH because he knows he sapped a Dr. Boom. Okay, all right, it's a Hex. He didn't cut Hex. We got that one ruled out. We're good. We're good. There's Hex in the deck. But yeah, I mean, this is just a game of chicken right now between Dr. Boom and the big game hunter.
Oh, he's gonna actually Hex an Azure Drake. He's playing. There's not that many minions on the rogue side for him to Hex. I think there might be a Ragnaros flush in the deck, but it's this typical deck. Again, it only runs the Dr. Boom plus Ragnaros and perhaps the Prince Trade Galloway. That one's very rare, and sometimes it runs Alexstrasza, again, a very rare card. So only 2 threats. He's still of a rogue has used one of them right now. Hex is perfectly acceptable, especially when you know you can potentially draw into your second Hex or your BGH. So this board is very scary for the rogue player, but Blade Flurry does some work. And he's actually able to clear.
Yeah, I mean,
this game is much closer than I thought it was going to be.
It really is, to be honest. The rogue player has shown a good job of just being resilient basically the entire game. And we're getting to the point now where the shaman is the one that's starting to run out of a little bit of juice. We do know there's a Bloodlust in hand, and of course, we also know that Genius played against Bloodlust last game. He knows it's in the deck, so he's got to be playing around it. I was a little surprised that he actually hit the face last time with his dagger rather than hitting the healing totem, because he would have cleared that in the Blade Flurry as well. So I'm a little surprised he left it on the board because that is a threat now.
Yeah, unfortunately, Rogue draws into another card that he doesn't necessarily want right now. The Tinctor's Oil is going to buff up his weapon, or it could buff up his weapon, but it's not going to buff up any minions on his side of the board because he doesn't have any minions on his side of the board. He's really looking, again, he's looking to draw into those sprints, and it's going to be a real shame. You know, the worst game in the world is actually when your sprints are on the bottom 2 cards of your deck.
Oh, yes, absolutely, because you're just like, let's see how much fatigue damage I can take. This is fun. So with Bloodlust, he's going to have 11 damage available to him next time. So he's a little bit off of lethal. He'll have to find a couple of damage. Right now, the rogue player, I mean, if he preps and then casts a spell, like you said, he can't hit a minion with it, but he can give his attack some power, so he can start trying to hit the face, possibly. And I think that's what he's got to do, right? There's a 50% chance that the totem next turn is a taunt totem. Jeez, I couldn't think of the word, and I was feeling terribly embarrassed there for a second, but we'll see how he plays around it. Decides to just kill it and pass turn.
Stone Call Totem would also have been acceptable.
Yes. Oh, wait, and there's a Fire Elemental. Okay, so we know he's playing Fire Elemental as well. What cards are not in this deck now?
Yeah, it's going to be the Crackle, the Lightning Bolt, and Doomhammer, I believe. Those are the 3 cards he cut for Bloodlust,
Black Knight,
and Black Knight. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh.
Fair point, fair point.
Backstab.
Okay, so he gets backstabbed, and he actually gets in 4 damage, but that's it. That's going to be Bloodlust, and Bloodlust is going to turn this around, and this is going to be a game once again for the Korean team. They are up 2-0 over the US Collegiate squad.
Yeah, that was a very close game, much closer than I expected, but again, at the very end, Bloodlust was the key to end the game. Bloodlust was the last card played in each of the 2 games that the Korean player won.
So really,
they're up 2-0.
Really, this was just a different way to get at the Shaman burst, to be totally honest. We were talking about that kind of when the Shaman was first brought in, that, a Shaman is going to want to clear board, incremental minions, little dudes, deal a couple of damage, and then wham, bam. Usually some people, it's Doomhammer, Rockbiter Weapon. It could be Alakir, Flang Tongue, Rockbiter Weapon. There's a lot of possibilities you can do to get that burst. But to kind of go off of the conventional plan of a couple of damage spells, Lightning Bolt, Crackle, like you were talking about before, which Crackle just has too much RNG for me to play with on a regular basis. It's just too frustrating when it hits 3 damage. I'm sorry. But like, he does it in the form of Bloodlust and does it pretty effectively while playing some higher end control cards and Black Knight and stuff like that. So a clever deck, but it worked out really well.
Yeah, I think the choice to run Bloodlust instead of things such as Doomhammer as your burst is that there's so many Harrison Jones right now in the meta right now, because everyone's running Paladins, Warriors, Jiraxis, and Hunters. All those decks and all those classes are able to be Harrison. And if you run Doomhammer, you're just playing into that. And if you run Bloodlust, you're like, I don't have any Harrison targets. That 5 mana creature is just a 5/4 against me. It doesn't do much. And it's still acceptable as a burst. It's not as good at when you're behind. The Doomhammer is able to clear your opponent's minions turn by turn, but it works just as effectively as a final burst damage, and perhaps even more effectively when you're playing against a more passive deck such as Handlock.
Yeah. And I agree, and with running those Black Knight cards, with running more BGHs and stuff like that, that gives him more tempo swing in his deck inherently than a deck that normally has Doomhammer anyway. So yeah, I think Bloodlust was a fine fit. Okay, so we are about to move on to set number 3. So set number 3 is going to be played out between Bloody Face from Georgia Tech. He'll be going up against Korea University's Irony. So our player from Georgia Tech, he is running a Druid, a Warlock, and a Warrior. That is pretty common. There are a few players that are running that exact setup. He was also running a Shaman, but that was banned. It was the only Shaman to make an appearance on the US side, period, in any of the decks, and it was banned. I want to point that out. On Irony's side for Korea University, his Warlock deck was banned. He is running a Shaman, a Warrior, and a Mage.
Wow, a Mage. And I'm really excited to see what kind of Mage there is. I think out of all the different classes, Mage is the one that has the most different types of decks. You have the standard Mech Mage, and even with Mech Mage, you can tune it to be more aggressive, to be less aggressive. You can have it add more legendaries or more towards the front end in order for it to be more aggressive. You can also have the typical Freeze Mage, in which you just freeze the board and then finish the game with Frostbolt, Ice Lance, Fireball, Pyroblast, Fireball. You can have more of like a hyped mage, as it's called, where you have Giants, where you have Twilight Drakes, and then you run cards such as Duplicate, perhaps even Echo Medivh. That's another completely different play style. And am I missing any archetypes? I believe that covers most of it. And there's also like Secrets Mage, and you can kind of blend that into Mech Mage as well. So there's just so many options to build a Mage deck, and each of those decks are strong and weak against certain things. For example, the Freeze Mage is strong against Zoo. It's strong against Handlock, perhaps, but it's weak against Warrior. But if you want a Mage deck that's good against Warrior, you run something like Mech Mage, or you run something like the Hyped Mage with Duplicates. There's just so many options for the Mage.
Yeah, but like, and it's always so frustrating for me as a Warrior, because apart from Handlock, the deck that I play the most is Control Warrior, and it's so frustrating for me going up against those Mech Mage decks, because it comes down to a race of how quickly can I neutralize Snowchugger, essentially, right? Because if Snowchugger gets one decent value hit against me and freezes me up and I'm unable to use my weapons, they flood the board too much for Brawl to do anything by turn 5, you know? And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, that even mages can hit that absolutely perfect, ridiculous Mech Warper hand where all of a sudden on turn 3, there's already spider tanks like running all over the place, and you're just like, well, okay, great, now I get to deal with all of this. So I'll be interested to see what sort of mage this is, like you said, because not only is there flexibility in the archetypes, but even within the individual categories themselves. Like, just look at the more zoo-ish mech mages and stuff like that. You have way cancerous versions that use just like, 6 to 8 1-drops or something like that. The full damage kit and trying to get the best possible tribal synergy with mechs, and then you have the ones that go the other way too, with a bit more spells and a bit more direct damage. Looking at the decks though, as to what's going to come out first. So again, Bloody Face for Georgia Tech has Druid, he has Warlock, he has Warrior. Knowing that his opponent has Warrior, Shaman, Mage, maybe it's me again, but I tend to like the Warrior as an all-round starter, as something that has a good potential and survivability against a deck like a Shaman or a Mage, but of course, in the mirror matchup, it really just depends on how much armor and cards you have, so.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of it is going to come down to what decks Bloody Face considers are his best decks. is it most people think that Warrior and Handlock or Warrior and Zoo are some of the best decks in the game right now, especially in the Western scene. But perhaps Druid, I feel like, could be a more all-around deck to start with. And I feel like Druid is one of those decks that has the most potential in tournaments to 3-0 or 2-0 in this particular circumstance. And I believe in the history of Hearthstone, Druid is the deck that all kills opponents' lineups the most, because you can, again, it's like you can always draw Undertaker, but with Druid, you can always draw Walled Growth or Innervate. And there's 4 of those cards instead of 2 of them.
That's true, and the nice part about Druid is that it just has so much flexibility throughout its mana range as well, because like if you get into an Innervate a little bit later in the game, you didn't hit it early on, so you couldn't get out that awesome 7-mana creature on turn 5 or something. Aw, too bad, now you only have a turn 7 Force of Nature Savage Roar or something like that. Sorry, only had 14 burst damage off the top on an empty board on turn 7. So like, yeah, I agree with you, Druid always has that potential to have flexibility against the general decks that you see in the scene, so... it looks like that our players have been given the go-ahead to get started here, so we should begin here in just a moment. Back on the other side, though, like we mentioned, for Irony, his Warlock was banned out. He is running a Mage, a Shaman, and a Warrior. Between those 3, again, I think Warrior is a fine choice to lead with, but Mage can surprise a lot of people and take games almost any deck, like we were mentioning before, if you get that killer start. So I would not be surprised to see that either.
Yeah, funnily enough, even though we've seen Warrior in almost every lineup, I don't believe we've seen a Warrior game yet.
You are correct. You are 100% correct. And that actually saddens me because like I'm all ready to dunk the Warrior knowledge and I can't do any of it. It makes me sad because I'm not as well versed on the other decks, so I'm showing my ignorance here. Why? Why do you do this with me? Actually, we're about to get to the point though. After this, I do want to mention, so games 4, 5, and 6, every single Korean player has had their Warrior deck banned. Every single ban from here on out is a Warrior on the US side towards the Koreans.
All right. Pretty cool. So does that mean we're going to see a lot of Warriors, or?
Well, it looks like
I'm sure you'll get your chance to expend your Warrior knowledge sometime during the day. I'm sure there's going to be at least one Warrior deck that's going to be played.
And the problem is, too, is that it's losing a little bit of popularity and relevance on ladder as well, as people are gravitating towards other decks at the moment. So I'm just, it's just not there anymore. It makes me sad. Like we said, though, guys, we are here at Twin Galaxies live in North Hollywood. We are, of course, doing the CSL versus E-CCA International Collegiate Hearthstone show match, played out between 6 awesome players from the Korean collegiate scene versus 6 awesome players from the US collegiate scene. They're going up head-to-head in best of 3s. We've done 2 matches so far, and the Koreans have actually come out in control. It's been close matches. Both sets have gone 2-1, but the Koreans right now are on top 2-0 in overall sets.
Yeah, 2-0 indeed. Very surprising, or I guess somewhat surprising for a lot of people. Koreans tend to not be the best at card games or Hearthstone in general, from what we've seen in the scene, basically. 2 players, Kranich and sorry, what was the other BlizzCon qualifier's name? Kranich and hold on. Just joined SK Gaming.
Do it. I can do it. I got it. You keep going.
Anyway, those 2 players, they showed up at BlizzCon. They didn't do too well, although Kranich, I believe, got into either the top... he got into the top 4, actually, beating Colento with a Raging Worgen OTK Warrior deck, which is pretty awesome. Kranich is actually in college right now, and he was supposed to play in the show match.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, he had some prior obligations. I mean, it is the holidays. Well, we all have things to do. It's understandable that he couldn't make it.
No, totally. I understand.
Yeah, I would have loved to see him play, though. He's actually a really funny guy.
Oh, really?
The most interesting thing people know about him is that he learned English from Twitch chat.
So his entire vocabulary is just raise your dongers?
Yeah. So I was telling him during BlizzCon, if you win a match, you should just be like, Kappa Kappa Kranich boys, right?
Does he spell everything in all capitals but with a space in between each letter now? Like, is that the only way he can spell words in English? I hope so.
Anyway, he tells me it's a bit exaggerated. It's not actually that he learned English from Twitch chat, but I'm sure like just reading Twitch chat and listening to streamers, like it helped a lot. And in fact, I was talking to Magic Amy recently, and
She's been trying to learn English a lot more too.
Okay.
Her English is very good, but she also says that she learns English a lot just from watching Twitch and interacting with streamers. So yeah, it's a great way to learn English apparently for a foreign audience.
And I just want to say after that comment that we no way endorse what Monk is saying in any way, shape, or form. If you want to learn English, we recommend that you look up many educational resources and not rely on Twitch chat. Twitch chat, God bless your heart, I love you to death, but not going to learn English from you. There we go, Kappa 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 lol. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Penguinology. All right, so we're going to jump into the game here in just a second. Our players are just getting started. They're in the menu and prepping their decks right now. As we mentioned before, we are heading into a best of 3, and this is going to be played out between Bloodyface, who is representing Georgia Tech and the U.S. side. He's going up against Irony from Korea University. They will play a best of 3 out against each other, and then we'll move into the next set of games after that. But already we've seen, I guess the Shaman deck is probably the most unique deck that we've seen. We did see kind of a resurgence of the really over-the-top Face Hunter in our first set, but I think the Shaman deck's probably the most unique deck we've seen so far.
Yeah, I guess I haven't seen anything quite like it post-GVG, adding BGH, adding Black Knight, adding Bloodlust. I mean, all the changes make sense. I just haven't seen anyone do it yet.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Changes.
I like it. I don't know if I support it or endorse it entirely for ladder, though. I mean, it seems like you would run into a few problems against some of the quicker aggro decks, just not having Lightning Bolt available. Sometimes having those 4 1-mana 3 damage options between 2 Rockbiter weapons, 2 Lightning Bolts can sometimes really save your skin against aggro.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a lot of these decks are more towards more geared towards tournament play.
Yeah, definitely.
Adding things such as BGH, such as Black Knight, you're going to just be seeing a lot more control in tournaments than on ladder. On ladder, everyone just wants to rank up quickly. They play cancer decks such as Zoo, such as Hunter. BGH isn't nearly going to be as useful against those kind of decks, except Hunters these days are even running Dr. Boom, so
yes,
I guess you can BGH that. Or if you've been paying attention to Reddit lately, there's a picture of a 7/8 Undertaker, and the caption was, "Oh, I guess this is why I run BGH against Hunter."
It's only done 21 damage to me up to this point. It's perfect for 1 mana.
Yeah, I can kill it now.
Yeah, easy. No, I actually really, my favorite thing to do right now, because I do run Warrior a good portion of the time, probably about 50% of my games, and there's no more fun thing in the world than Cruel Taskmaster BGH, just because like it's removal that no one ever expects, but it's another way to utilize Cruel Taskmaster, especially when they throw out something like Lotheb or something like that. It's a non-spell way to really efficiently clear the board and get tempo. So. I don't know. I like running an abundance of BGHs. I'm not running 2 in ladder right now. I'm just running 1, but I am really tempted to try it once I start getting up a little bit higher in the ranks again this season.
Yeah, I believe there's a player called the Lucky One, and he was running 2 BGHs in Control Warrior, and he finished something like top 20 or top 30 Legends. So
really,
it is obviously going to be viable at the top ranks of Legends.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that because I was at the close of the season on December 31st. I was just oddsing some of his games, and I'm like, oh, 2 BGH, that's very interesting.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the first time I saw it pop up in tournament play, I was like, whoa, what? Like, I was always the guy who would just, like, disenchant my extra BGH every time I got it in packs and stuff, because I'm like, no, it's fine. You're only ever going to use 1. It's okay. It's cool. And now I'm freaking out a little bit. I don't know. All right, guys. So, well, thank you very much to everyone who is tuning in. Of course, you are tuning into the E-CCA versus CSL International Collegiate Hearthstone show match presented by Twin Galaxies live here out of North Hollywood, California. And this is a really awesome studio, I have to say. This is my first time here, so I'm really enjoying the whole event and being able to present these games to you. Of course, Monk, it's been a pleasure to cast with you up to this point and see the kind of crazy amateur decks that we've been seeing up to this point, and even some of the cooler pro players that have jumped in here, too. But Korea has been dominating so far. It's been all 2-1s, but they're up 2-0 in this set so far. And just given the amount of decks that they have left, they are actually, the next series, we're actually going to see a Priest deck out of the Korean player. And that is actually the only Priest in the entire tournament today, both banned or just in their set. That is I mean, I realize that Priest has kind of been up and down since GVG. People alternately at times think, no, it's actually really good and there's some clever things you can do with it. And then at times it just goes way under the table because it lacks consistency against some of the archetypes in tournament play right now. But I guess I'm a bit surprised to only see one Priest, but yet we have 4 rogues here, you know?
Yeah, it just feels like when GVG was first released, people were really hyping up Priest. They were like, oh my god, Shrink Master, Vol'jin. Like, those are 2 of the, most people thought were 2 of the best cards to come out of GVG, but it just hasn't planned out as effectively because I guess Shrinkmeister is the main concern in that it's kind of clunky in that you have to combo it with something.
Yes.
And if you don't have like all these combos in Priest, if you don't have like Shrinkmaster plus something, a Circle plus something, or a Pyromancer plus something, like your deck just doesn't come together, and it just takes 1 or 2 key turns for you to just fail against aggro. And I guess that's what Priest lacks right now, a more consistent way to play. It relies so much on combos that it doesn't work out sometimes.
Right. No, and you're right, and that's the problem that I've had with Priest whenever I take it to ladder or rank play or something like that, is that I always, because when it goes off right, it's so cool, right? Like you can do some combos with Priest that just don't exist in other parts of the game. Whether you're stealing minions, swapping them, getting them to kill each other and stuff like that, you've got some really awesome plays, especially with Light Bomb in the mix now too. But it just, on those times when it fails and you look down at your hand and you're like, well, I've got Pyromancer, Circle of Healing, Circle of Healing. All right, well, what do I do with that? And then you just have dead cards, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, funny story. Before casting this tournament, I was actually playing some ladder, and I ran into Amaz, and of course, he is pretty lucky. He thought stole my Dr. Boom. He thought stole my Harrison Jones when I was playing Paladin. He thought stole on turn 3, Harrison me on turn 5. That was pretty sad.
Oh, that's so frustrating. The only thing that's more frustrating is when someone thought steals a shield block shield slam from you, because it's the only way that it makes shield slam okay whenever it gets thought stolen. And here we are going to have, for Irony on the Korean side, he's running his Shaman deck, and we have the Druid popping out for Bloody Face.
Wow, and Bloody Face is, again, he's running a similar Druid as Dart, and that kind of makes me think, did the North American players like practice together? Did they like work together on decks before they came into this tournament? Because this looks very similar. There's so many types of Druid decks, and this is a very rare type of deck to run, the ramp style. It's not something that we see in a lot of tournaments. And in fact, Sunwalker, I don't believe we've ever seen Sunwalker before in a tournament before this one in GVG.
And I'm wondering about that, and I think that, but we have had moments like this, right? Like every once in a while, when aggro gets a little too out of check and people quit running a Black Knight. This happened like right around Curse of Naxxramas as well, and everyone's like, no, it's okay, we don't have to worry about these taunts. And all of a sudden, for like a 2 or 3 week period, Ramp Druid comes back, and you just see taunt after taunt after taunt until it starts to stabilize again. I would not be, I guess, totally shocked if something like that happened here.
Here's an interesting card. We see a Healing Touch in the Druid's hand right now.
Mm-hmm. Let's see.
Healing Touch, not a card that you see in Ramp Druid even.
No.
It's more of like a Mill Druid card, right?
So this is like Druid taunts, not just Druid Ramp explicitly though. So his curve is just super sick once he starts getting up to turn 5 though.
Mm-hmm. It's just all about whether he can survive up to turn 5.
That's a good point.
Or even a Dr. Boom. Because the Shaman's board is already so strong. All he needs on top of that is to draw a Flame Tongue Totem. And he's gonna be so good. Because there's no way for the Shaman to kill this Flame Tongue Totem right now.
If he... Yeah. There's no way for him to take the board back. A Flame Tongue Totem would probably have been a guaranteed game win. Mm-hmm. As it stands now, he just has to go ahead and get the best possible totem they could have gotten in that position, and he protects his Haunted Creeper.
Oh my god, Mind Control Tech.
I love it.
That's so great. Yeah, Dart was using Mind Control Tech too, and that leads me to believe, they might be sharing some of a similar deck. Although, one thing that leads to believe they're not using the same deck is that you typically don't run Force of Nature, Savage Roar, and combination of Healing Touch. Those are kind of like 2 different philosophies. Force of Nature, Savage Roar is kind of, I want to end the game early, whereas Healing Touch is I want to draw out the game as long as possible. So it could be that they're running similar decks, but they just swapped out Force of Nature Savage Roar for Healing Touch, plus something else perhaps.
Right. So, I mean, I think playing the longer game here is going to be absolutely fine. I would be curious to see what if Irony had maybe been talking to his teammate from the previous game, and this deck is actually going to be mirrored pretty close to that Shaman we saw last time, or if this is going to be a little bit more unique. We already do have the Rag off the top. He finally drew that Flame Tongue Totem a little bit too late, and he's going to decide to just go ahead and draw a card now. Draws into a Sludge Belcher, which is... It's fine, but it's not the most useful thing in the world against this particular Druid deck, because he doesn't really care about pushing through for damage or what's on board.
Mm-hmm. Well, fortunately, he has the Mind Control tech, and we might see it get good value right now. If he's stealing something huge like the Azure Drake, it could just be game over. It's like a super Cabal Shadow Priest then. Yep. And there's just really no way for Shaman to come back from that. We all know that Cabal Shadow Priest is one of Shaman's worst nightmares, so something stealing a Twilight Drake. Oh, he does!
Oh, man, that's so unlucky. Now he's just going to hero power and hit for 1, but grabbing that 4/4 is devastating because he clears, what, 6 of the 7 damage that was available for the Shaman on the board with just 1 card? That seems pretty good.
Well, you can stop casting now. The game's kind of over. It's the Mind Control tech stealing the Azure Drake. What can you do there as the Shaman player? It's just so much of a swing.
Yeah, you're right.
That's like a 3/3 plus a Mind Control. So essentially, like 13 mana worth of template right there in just that one play.
Nah, he's got it. No big deal. He's coming back from this. This is fine. Actually, Feral Spirit is not terrible here, to be totally honest. The Druid has still not hit any wild growth, so he's still on the play out the smaller minions first, which means that we're probably going to see Sylvanas here. Could very well be a Druid of the Claw, depending on if he wants to charge it and possibly clear out some additional value here. Or he'll just draw into the perfect card for his curve and top deck a Sunwalker, and he can clear up the Flame Tongue Totem and the Healing Totem with the Twilight Drake and throw down the Sunwalker, and he'll be fine on top of that.
Yeah, if he could have somehow gotten the Flame Tongue Totem behind the taunt, and then gotten continuous value out of that totem, plus the second totem, there might be a way for him to get like extreme value and trade up against every single one of the Druid's creatures. But unfortunately, the Flame Tongue Totem right now, as it is exposed. It's going to die for free to one of the Druid's creatures.
Yep.
And we're just going to see the Druid playing on curve every single turn. There's very little decision making that you can make at this point. I guess on turn 7, he's going to have his choice of, do I Ancient of War, or War, or Dr. Boom? Like, first world problems, right?
Yeah, which amazing blowout card do I want to play right now? Honestly, between those, I think his hand is good enough that he doesn't have to stretch for Ancient of Lore. I don't think it's going to benefit him to grab the 2 cards this second. I think he could probably just Dr. Boom and take massive control of the board that way. If he plays out the Ancient of War, it could always get hexed. If he plays out the Ancient of Lore, that's a 5/5, and that's actually totally fine. But I just feel like Dr. Boom gets him so much farther ahead here.
Yeah, I agree. Even though Dr. Boom can be BGH, which is actually a card that the Shaman has right now, if you're not super behind if he BGHs you because you still have the Boom Box. Whereas if you use Ancient of War, there's the possibility of Hex being such a huge swing. It's essentially a 4-point mana swing.
Let's see, so Keeper of the Grove, he's actually thinking about using that on the Flame Tongue Totem there. Looks like he's going to choose to use it on the Sludge Belcher so he can clear up the Flame Tongue Totem by himself. And he should be able to clear the Sludge Belcher here too. This isn't as impressive as laying down one of his massive legendaries, but of course he'll be quite happy with the play. And now he has retained almost complete control of the board. And whenever you're behind 3 minions as a Shaman to a Ramp Druid, you have very little recovery options.
Yeah, the play that the Druid did, even though it was not as strong, there was less of a possibility for the Shaman to blow him out.
Yep.
There's no real card like BGH or Hex in order to just blow out this board completely. No matter what the Shaman does, the Druid player will still be ahead the following turn.
Pyromancer Hex is going to... No, is he going to Pyromancer Feral Spirit? Okay, so Pyromancer Feral Spirit is still going to kill the 4/1. Of course, it lowers all his stuff down. Can he get a Healing Totem?
That's kind of funny. Oof. No, fortunately not. It's kind of funny. Wild Pyro Feral Spirits. I have not seen that play in a very long time.
No. I haven't seen too many Pyros and Shaman decks. Well, I mean, I guess I've seen a few since at the end of the season. I saw a couple with them just trying to deal really efficiently with Hunters. But I don't know.
I feel like the Vault Pyros were like fairly common at a certain point, pretty much back in very early 2014.
Yeah.
When Shamans relied on that card to deal against Zoo, and this was back when Haunted Creepers didn't exist.
Right.
When Zombie Chows didn't exist. So they were pretty much the most effective way that the Shamans had in order to deal with the Zoo menace.
Now, the Druid player has a wealth of options available to him, and he's actually just going to straight up take the least impactful but most greedy and amazing play and just draw more cards. He knows he has a massive advantage on board right now, and he can actually clear out the Wild Pyromancer just with his hero power. So, again, he's just playing incredibly safe right now. He's taking no risks whatsoever and ensuring that he just wins the game.
Yeah, it might seem like a weaker play, but it leaves him less open to blowouts. If his opponent uses a Hex here on the Ancient of Lore, he's perfectly fine with that.
It's a pretty good top deck, though.
Dr. Boom comes out, but Swiped is also a good top deck. You can pretty much clear the board, in addition to laying down the Druid of the Claw, which is, again, a pretty good threat. And not only is the Druid of the Claw a good threat, but it also baits out the Hex, which leaves the Shaman open to a follow-up Ancient of War play.
And it looks like he's thinking about Keeper of the Grove for the last 2 damage here on Dr. Boom, and then maybe using his hero power to knock out one of the Boom bots. That's a possibility. But
yeah, I guess the swipe is valuable, but the Keeper, the problem with the Keeper play is that you're probably going to hero power after, and that doesn't develop the board as much. So I like using the swipe here.
And there's a potential, I agree with you, and there was a potential as well for the Boom bots to like insta-gib the Druid of the Claw right after it, or the Keeper of the Grove right after it as well, so if you would use the hero power. All right, so when there's only 1 minion left to kill on board and you don't have a super efficient way to extend your own board, you throw down Ragnaros. 50-50 chance clears the board, and it does. So Rag is on board, but, oh, good lord.
Whoa,
now,
my god.
Dr. Boom, Sarah, Sylvanas, doesn't really matter. He should just kind of close his eyes right now and just start throwing cards onto the board.
Yeah, it doesn't look that great right now for the Druid as you might think, because Rag is on the board and there's no way for the Druid to deal with it. We don't see a BGH draw from the Druid, so I think the best play for the Druid right now is to try to fish for the BGH with the Wild Growth. He's already gone through so many of his cards in his deck with the Ancient of Lore that it's very possible that he could just top deck it with the Wild Growth right now. I mean, none of his other plays look very good right now besides Wild Growth.
Yeah, I mean, he could potentially throw up an Ancient of War afterwards, assuming that his opponent hadn't drawn into Hex or something. Maybe he can think he can draw a Rag hit and still survive. And he ends up getting a Druid of the Claw there, so that prevents him from being able to play 2 cards at once. I think Sylvanas is fine here. He'll hero power, hit the face, get 1 more damage in, because of course if that Rag does turn around and hit Sylvanas, well then he either gets the 0-2 or Rag. But the problem for him now is that the Shaman is coming back with a passion. He's going to have his Hex Doomhammer combo if he wants. He could potentially even just Earthshock here and leave the damage on the board and start going for the face again. In any case, he has got a pretty massive amount of power here to deal with singular minions. So where this is actually turning around for him pretty decently well, just because the Druid has had a lot of very awkward plays to clear the board, but yet hasn't reestablished the board himself.
Yeah, we see this. Rag is not a card we see in a lot of Shaman decks, but it's the choice to run it is actually turning out really good for him. Now the Shaman plays the Doomhammer, but this leaves him open to a possible Harrison Jones. Not only does Harrison Jones draw a lot of cards to the Druid player, but allows him to draw into a potential BGH, which again, if the Harrison BGH combo comes, it's going to turn the game straight up around. Fortunately for our Shaman player, Bloody Face does not have either of those cards, BGH or Harrison Jones.
No, he doesn't. What can he do? Keeper of the... Let's see here. Druid of the Claw puts a taunt up, and he could potentially throw in his Healing Touch afterwards. Oh, this is really rough, because anything he plays is either going to get BGH'd or knocked out pretty efficiently. He can throw up his Ancient of War here into a 5/10 and possibly just use Healing Touch to get him back to 17.
Yeah, but the thing is, Oh my god, Rag is just so threatening on this board right now, and it's been doing so much work throughout the entire game. Healing Touch kind of feels like you're just kind of giving into the Rag, but I guess Healing Touch would give him another turn to survive, another turn to potentially draw the BGH.
Well, I mean, because knowing that your opponent has an active Rag and Doomhammer on board, any sort of a silence effect plus Rockbiter weapon or something like that, and this game's over.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, he plays the play that allows him to survive one more turn, and which gives him one more chance to draw the BGH. Even if he draws the BGH, though, what does that mean? Like, he's still going to be in danger from dying just from a Rockbiter draw.
Right.
So I believe he needs some combination of, like, Harrison and BGH, or a taunt plus BGH.
And Ancient of Lore will draw him the cards to potentially find that BGH, but then of course he sets himself up for every other possibility of Shaman Burst that exists. Like, you already know your opponent has an active Doomhammer on board. It's very difficult to do this, but you almost have to. If he decides to put down 2 taunts right now, there's a good potential that they just get removed. We already know they're going to get removed because we see Spell Power Totem is already up and there's 2 Lightning Storms already in hand for the Shaman player.
Innervate is one card, and BGH is not the other card.
Oof, that is rough. And I think that's lethal because no matter what he does, double Lightning Storm wins the game here, right?
Double Lightning Storm, especially with the Spell Power Totem already on the board, which you can't really clear right now.
Yeah, that is actually going to be GG because he's going to double Lightning Storm, and that is... How did the Shaman came back, and the Druid was able to have 3 minions on board at one point with no counter available from the Shaman, yet the Shaman found a way back into this game. That's crazy, and Korea takes game number 1 of our 3rd set. There you have it, Irony taking a game over Bloodyface.
Yeah, Rag just doing... Rag was really just the MVP of this game, even though the... I remember I said the game was over when the Mind Control tech stole the Azure Drake, but somehow Rag just came back, and there's no way for the Druid to deal with it. No BGH, and that was just the one card that Druid needs to deal with it. You don't draw BGH, you can't deal with Rag. It's sort of like it's a very tough position for the Druid to be in. And again, we see the Shaman being the MVP of the Korean players. They brought Shaman more than any other. They brought Shaman in spades. I believe almost every Korean player had a Shaman, and it's been their most successful deck so far.
And it's done better in recovery against a Ramp Druid than I had anticipated that it would. Yes, you were right. He was missing BGH. He didn't have that available to him. Aha! A warrior. But I was still staggered at the ability of, when you have a Ramp Druid who's already on 6 mana, who already has 3 minions on the board, who has already gotten into his taunts, to be able to come back against that is pretty amazing. All right, so the Warrior keeps Fiery War Axe, one of the most powerful early game cards you could possibly have in any deck, and Double Feral Spirit coming out here on Irony's side.
Yeah, this looks like a decent hand for both players. The Warrior already has the Fiery War Axe, and he already, perhaps more importantly, he already has the BGH to deal with the Shaman's Rag, which again was the card that won him the game the last turn. He's like, oh, even if he had the BGH in his opening hand, he might have been like, oh, I'm definitely keeping this card. Like, I need this card to beat Rag.
That's exactly what he was planning right from the get-go. All right, so this is always an annoying place to be as a Shaman player, just because you're like, all right, well, the Warrior is literally going to do nothing until I'm able to put some sort of a defense in front of my card draw, or some sort of a defense in front of a couple of minions. Yeah, I mean, this hand is just sickly good early game hand for the Shaman under most circumstances.
Yeah, so tell me a bit more about the Shaman versus Warrior matchup, since you proclaim to be such a Warrior expert. What kind of cards? What kind of cards is the Warrior looking for, and how does the Warrior typically win the game?
Okay, so as a Warrior, I go extreme board control. The way that I play this matchup is board control basically at all costs, because I have been killed by burst combos pretty aggressively. I rely a lot on using my health as a resource, so the biggest cards that I'm looking for are my weapons, hands down, at all times. I always want weapons, I want weapons, 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 and I want to be clearing minions. Depending on the variation you play, I am a big proponent of Baron Geddon. I think it is a massively underrated card. I think it is arguably one of the top cards in the entire game. That's how much I like it. And And I will go so far as if I have at least one weapon in hand and at least one way to gain armor, I will keep Baron Geddon in my opening hand against a Shaman. So I just like it, and I like having the consistency.